Monsters first appeared 3 decades earlier. However, they no longer pose a threat, as individuals possessing superpowers handled the situation. This event also signaled the beginning of an international competition called the Hunters League. The protagonist stepped into the arena, where a fervent crowd cheered, and he prepared his weapon as lights illuminated his eyewear, given his status as a premier competitor. However, his excellent showing the previous summer and subsequent failure to qualify meant his past successes appeared instantly erased, for 2 straightforward causes, which left the protagonist deeply annoyed, prompting him to hurl his mobile device in a fit of rage. The entire incident occurred before the man seated across from him. That man proceeded to address Chang Man, asserting his professional career might be concluding. Liu Ying, the main character, was taken aback. The man expressed his wish for Chang Yun to exit gaming and enter business, then brought up his compulsory military service. In that moment, the crushed protagonist considered that being merely dismissed from the team would have been preferable. He was fully aware that eventually, retirement awaited him, and his keen abilities would certainly diminish as youth departed, but this was different. Being requested by his manager to become a mere figurehead, devoid of authority in the team he had single-handedly guided to triumph, felt scandalous. Consumed by fury, Chang Hyun abruptly kicked the table, which startled his manager. The hero then started to depart, declaring the discussion concluded. The manager reacted angrily, asserting the hero needed to display respect rather than maintaining an attitude causing fans to request his departure. However, when the manager stated his regret for developing him, the young man became still in his spot, then spun around, approaching the frightened man with rage. He seized the man's collar. Chang Hyun then told his manager that he had brought their organization all its achievements. The hero started to regret his manager's past persuasion for activating his full bloom as part of a team, since the skill's strength grew over time, granting immense power, but halting his advancement after activation. The businessman responded that his actions were solely what he deemed optimal for the hero. Chang Hyun became extremely furious and shoved the man aside. The man was left trembling with fear. He understood the manager caused his suffering. However, striking him would not undo previous errors. Thus, the elite gamer found himself at his lowest point, signaling his impressive career's conclusion. He could no longer gain strength, even with many high-level abilities. Consequently, aging became his sole path, along with the skill prematurely activated, which hindered his progress. Chang Hyun started questioning if existence retained any purpose. While traversing the street, he pondered whether dying might truly offer release, until abruptly, he confronted an oncoming truck. Chang Hyun supposed that even if his existence held true purpose, life's value diminished as the collision drew near. Suddenly, the dreadful event unfolded, sending the vehicle astray, where it then collided with the roadside, causing a massive blast. Concurrently, the protagonist sustained severe harm, garments engulfed in fire as he collapsed. He then reconsidered his current outlook, realizing his genuine wish was to continue the struggle, even briefly. Chang Hyun yearned for public admiration from the stage once more, following another major win. The protagonist wished to experience such joyful times alongside his companions. However, at this moment, his eyes shed tears as he faced imminent demise, reflecting on a desire to lead a life free of regret. The legendary player's final memory of his initial existence was this incident. Suddenly, the main character experienced bewilderment, finding himself within his own chamber. However, the surroundings seemed strange, prompting him to hurry towards the mirror, discovering his appearance had reverted to his middle school years. At that moment, a woman entered through the doorway and inquired if Chang Hyun was ready. The protagonist felt stunned because his mother too displayed a younger look. The woman questioned her child about any issues, but he promptly dismissed her concern. Chang Hyun ultimately understood he had traveled back in time after this discovery. The youth felt immense joy, anticipating a chance to revisit his former triumphs, ensuring no repetition of previous errors. Hunting ability was assessed through physical power, measured with cutting-edge equipment. However, the sophisticated device failed to pinpoint the Awakener's skill attributes. This necessitated Awakener's speculation on spells and their deployment strategies. However, the protagonist was exempt from this responsibility, owing to his all-seeing eye. That evening, the hero reclined on his bed, inspecting his system window. His full bloom had reverted to rank A, precisely as foreseen. Iggy felt no apprehension, knowing that skills were trainable and gear could be reacquired. Nevertheless, the hero's chief worry was adapting to his frail body and low-tier skills. Suddenly, he overheard an argument occurring nearby. The man expressed that the protagonist could choose his own path, but the mother objected, asserting the boy's youth consequently. The man requested a 1-year trial period. However, the others clarified that a year was excessive, fearing her son might neglect studies and jeopardize his grades for an uncertain aspiration. The discussion prompted the protagonist to remember his mother's initial disapproval of his ambition to become a hunter, though he knew arguing with her was unproductive. However, at that moment, he realized one party in the dispute highlighted a year's potential significance. The boy grasped his mother's point, understanding that within a year, a hunter might participate in many contests, accumulate expertise, and enhance abilities. He considered how his full bloom might have attained B rank had he begun sooner, thereby improving his gaming career significantly. Therefore, he interrupted the discussion, declaring he needed half a year to demonstrate his worth to his mother, which left both individuals astonished. The female participant became anxious, whereas the male's demeanor brightened. Changyun asserted he would display his abilities to his mother. Subsequently, the protagonist was perplexed upon being refused entry. The woman clarified that facility entry for minors needed a guardian's approval. This fact had escaped the hero's memory, given his age and experience, causing frustration since training was now impossible. Just as he prepared to inquire about a workaround, a tap came on his shoulder. Changyun received a greeting from a cheerful young man, whom he identified as Dojin Kim, who then questioned his presence. The protagonist described himself as a close-range hunter, enjoying a comfortable existence as a first-division elite connected to professionals, even without being top-ranked. However, the hero needed to assert his unfamiliarity, as they were meant to be complete strangers at this point. Consequently, the young man presented himself to the hero, mentioning their adjacent classes and his reputation as an awakener throughout the school. But when the protagonist insisted he had no prior knowledge of him, the young man appeared stunned, and Dojin Kim chose to acknowledge the circumstances. He then inquired if the protagonist intended to join the Hunter Youth Club, but the protagonist stated his purpose was the training room, which required guardians. Dojin Kim declared his power to allow the hero entry, explaining his membership in the Academy Youth Club, a fact unknown to the hero. Changyun understood that nothing came without a cost when the young man insisted on observing his training. The protagonist found it inconvenient but agreed, realizing no real danger existed. The lady then directed him to Training Room 3, noting a youth club member had agreed to supervise. Subsequently, the voice expressed surprise that another student at school desired to become a hunter, which left the protagonist astonished, realizing the comment was about him. Dojin Kim reiterated his membership in the Hunter Youth Club, mentioning his difficulty integrating since other members were older and unfamiliar. He then inquired why our hero chose the rarely used training room, prompting the explanation that it likely stemmed from the Hunter League's widespread appeal. Changyun questioned whether the boy genuinely wished to observe his routine training and skill assessment. However, when Dojin Kim offered assistance to his schoolmate, the protagonist swiftly understood an underlying desire for recognition. Nevertheless, the protagonist found acceptance impossible, given his status as a reincarnation, which made him significantly older than the middle school student. Consequently, all arrangements were complete. The training session was scheduled, commencing with the emergence of a brilliant light nearly dazzling Dojin Kim. Following this, the tanker clone brought forth by the protagonist began to materialize, its form reminiscent of a video game's. Such a creation served as a practice unit. Yet it proved different. A massive shield materialized, rendering its defenses nearly impervious to damage. Dojin believed the training was incorrectly configured, proposing a standard clone's use since the tanker seemed invulnerable. Yet, the protagonist, drawing his weapon, asserted his schoolmate's words were illogical, stating that practice targets ought to be resilient. Changyun, with a wild smile, implied the creature's invulnerability applied solely to Dojin Kim. Breaking tough substances typically required a stronger impact, but since the protagonist lacked such means, only one approach remained to subdue the tanker, targeting its joints. Immediately, Changyun executed his initial spear thrust, striking the tanker clone effectively. The protagonist felt satisfied, possessing excellent control of his physique, prompting him to activate his all-seeing eye to pinpoint the practice dummy's vulnerabilities. Changyun then concentrated briefly, prior to rushing the simulated creature, managing to cut its arm and midsection, then delivering the decisive strike. The indestructible training dummy shattered and collapsed, signifying the youthful spearman's triumph. The impressive display caused him to wish he had recorded the practice. Dojin Kim asserted the hero won because the tanker's defense was set to its lowest, stating a special weapon would otherwise be necessary. The renowned player understood the middle schooler had devised an explanation for an incomprehensible event. Dojin Kim declared the hero, likely a spearmanship expert, deserved a spot in the youth club, and mentioned he too would attempt the training dummy. Changyun chose not to inform the younger boy about his feat, anticipating he would grasp the difficulty independently. That evening, Dojin Kim felt tired and perplexed, pondering how he had copied Changyun's precise actions. Confronting the training dummy, the student had reduced the dummy's defenses significantly, a situation that piqued his curiosity. The replica, even though it launched repeated assaults, remained completely unharmed. Later that evening, inside the facility, practice sessions persisted. The student thought he had misconfigured the practice routine until a voice unexpectedly addressed him. A club senior requested a proper welcome, leading Dojin Kim to respectfully bow before Jisoo. At that moment, the youth observed his teammate attempting to assault a tanker replica. The younger Kim then clarified their desire to prepare before the practice session. Jisoo criticized his choice of a training dummy for warm-ups and stated the younger player could not harm it, even with its defenses at a minimum, which caused Dojin Kim to feel frustrated by his lack of strength. Later, during his train ride, the hero considered his significant lack of power, since the General-Purpose Hunter Center provided Awakeners with standard training facilities. In solitude, the hero attempted to engage Hunters League monsters and utilize the A-spotting partner feature. He realized his urgent need for power, noting his all-seeing eyes B-rank status prevented him from executing strong attacks. Although his physical capabilities barely exceeded an average person's peak condition, the hero resolved to train to boost his strength, considering how his full bloom accelerated his recovery. Changhyun understood that consistent practice offered his sole path to gaining power, since he required his guardian's permission to access the Hunter Center training room, a significant inconvenience, prompting him to grab his smartphone and look for a private practice location. A sudden call came through from Dojin Kim. Dojin Kim promptly inquired about the protagonist's training plans, sparking curiosity, then offered to buy him dinner. Shortly thereafter, inside the Best Hangover Soup restaurant, Dojin Kim greeted his recently arrived schoolmate with a wave. Changhyun observed that Dojin Kim seemed wealthy, a fact Dojin Kim promptly affirmed. Dojin Kim explained that financial resources simplified the path to Hunter Way, a point the hero conceded, given the high cost of gear and assessments. Yet, the hero found himself recognizing the middle schooler before him as strikingly similar to someone from his prior existence due to his constant desire for notice. With that in mind, the protagonist urged Dojin Kim to state his true purpose, a request Dojin Kim failed to grasp, leading Changhyun to assert that the current invitation stemmed from a sense of compassion. Dojin Kim denied this, explaining he had something to discuss. The protagonist summoned the waiter, having deduced the middle schooler faced training difficulties. Dummy. Dojin Kim shared his struggle, detailing how the tanker clone remained undefeated even after he mimicked the prodigy's actions, prompting his request for guidance. However, his speech abruptly ceased as his gaze dropped, drawn by an observation. This sight piqued the hero's interest, causing him to also glance in that direction. At that moment, three youths, clad in attire matching Dojin Kim's, indicating their shared team affiliation, stepped into the establishment, speaking ill of him. The middle schooler experienced profound embarrassment as he became the target of ridicule for his attempts to overcome the tanker clone. Jisoo recounted inquiring about the young man's training motivation. The youth had claimed a friend's success in defeating it, but Jisoo remained unconvinced. With the taunts persisting, the protagonist understood that Dojin Kim's senior teammates were impeding his development, prompting him to intervene, then vocally asserting that modifying system parameters was unnecessary for defeating a tanker clone, and that the objective presented no difficulty whatsoever with the correct approach. The protagonist subsequently commended his friend for vanquishing such a formidable adversary, a feat others had declared impossible, given their own inability to accomplish it, which ultimately provoked Jisoo. When the youth commenced speaking about the academy, the individual rose. Dojin Kim attempted to quiet his companion promptly, but it proved unsuccessful. Jisoo subsequently rested his feet upon the table, requesting his colleagues quiet. He subsequently challenged the protagonist for speaking ill of them, asserting that an Awakener's assault, such as his own, might readily end the hero's life, prior to granting him 3 seconds to act as he deemed necessary. This left Changhyun impressed, observing Jisoo's behavior, reminiscent of a typical film ruffian. The hero became quite irritated, rising to his feet, realizing this implied he would not receive dinner. Changyun subsequently moved toward Jisoo, then nonchalantly struck him across the face, causing his two companions to become astonished and stunned, prompting them to swiftly assist him in rising. The renowned player considered his effective utilization of the time constraint, given his consistent objective of securing the initial strike. Consequently, Jisoo became irritated and provoked. Therefore, the hero clarified that although he was a colleague of his friend, he shared no personal connection with him, thus he ought to be left undisturbed. The angered youth attempted to hit the protagonist, but he skillfully evaded. Changhyun remembered Jisoo's claim that a single strike from him would defeat our hero, then implied their connection remained incomplete, which incited fury and wrath in his adversary. However, Jisoo's strike met swift redirection from our hero, who promptly launched a retaliatory left jab, realizing victory was unattainable through close-quarters fighting. The enraged youth opted for alternative methods, a choice that surprised our hero upon his understanding of the imminent event. Jisoo subsequently started collecting his mana. The protagonist's all-seeing eye, capable of sensing peril and vulnerability, commenced signaling him, prompting him to leap, evading just in time as the earth below started collapsing. Observing the condition of the adjacent ground, the hero understood his opponent was a gravity bender. This revelation showed Jisoo intended to fully employ his abilities, even with civilians nearby, whom Dojin Kim quickly moved to safety. Consequently, the youth unleashed his power anew, launching a further gravity assault that the hero narrowly avoided, putting him on guard since an airborne table had nearly crushed him. Although Changhyun preferred to hold back against the youth, he found himself without options, informing him that his opportunity was now over. The gravity manipulator retorted that he ought to be the one to state that, prior to launching still another assault, which the hero successfully evaded once more. Changhyun found himself in a difficult situation. Although his vision enabled him to avoid the gravity user's assaults, he remained unable to close the distance, prompting him to adopt alternative tactics by seizing a plate from the ground. He then launched it with maximum force towards his foe. The hero had propelled a dish at his adversary, but his opponent merely smiled, employing his gravity manipulation skill to halt the dish, then allowed it to drop. Jisoo then told our hero that such deceptions would not affect him, just as a food plate struck his face. The protagonist, continuing to hurl dishes, declared his foe ought to dodge them, which eventually infuriated him. Changhyun started considering that each skill had a cooldown, as his opponent faced a barrage of incoming dishes, and what might occur if this cooldown was ignored. Jisoo's hand started shaking then, as he found himself unable to employ his gravity manipulation, which let the protagonist strike his head with a plate another time, leaving him vulnerable without his ability, since he had disregarded the cooldown. The protagonist's cleverness had deeply annoyed his adversary, yet Jisoo then noticed the hero had vanished from his view, and a sudden shout of "heads" caused the boy to panic, covering his head, bewildered by the sound's origin, just as a punch landed, delivered by the protagonist, and immediately after Jisoo accused him of aiming for his stomach but hitting his skull, Changhyun yelled, "Heads!" a second time. The boy, startled, pondered the upcoming strike, and thus chose to shield his abdomen, assuming the protagonist would target it another time, but Changhyun instead struck his head. The protagonist's left fist repeatedly struck Jisoo's head, while he continued to shout "heads." Jisoo soon lost consciousness, so our hero chose to end the assault, but then something unexpected caught his gaze, startling him. As he surveyed the restaurant's condition, he confirmed to himself he hadn't caused the damage, despite our hero having thrown the initial punch, and he remained uninjured, while his adversary was left beaten and unconscious. Changhyun started formulating a plan, observing his opponent's two friends and his own companion had departed. Police suddenly arrived at the location, surprising the protagonist. With that being said, only a single course of action remained, so he dirtied his own face, and then he lifted the bully. Water was then splashed on him, aiming to awaken him. Jisoo's eyes opened, revealing the beginner's closed eyes on the floor, causing his complete bewilderment. But regardless of the situation, he chose to retaliate against his adversary. Then, unexpectedly, police arrived with an individual. Dojin Kim directed the officer's attention to the location. Jisoo swiftly understood his predicament, seeing his supposed vanquished foe plead for clemency. Consequently, the officer produced his stun gun, preparing to apprehend the youth. The protagonist felt quite satisfied, having successfully deceived the officer, which enabled him to avoid all police issues. Changhyun also understood the bully would not dispute his account, as the bully would feel too embarrassed to confess his defeat. Furthermore, should he choose to reveal the facts, the crime scene's condition worked against him. Later, at the training facility, discussions arose regarding Jisu's difficulties, initiated by Do-jun Kim, who detailed his reprimand from the team and the circulating rumors of his imminent removal. The hero felt satisfaction, knowing unfairness was prevented. Afterward, his companion inquired if he intended to get some rest. However, Changhyun promptly called forth a new clone, explaining that he lacked the means for such leisure. The hero remained resolute despite the exertion, whereas his friend simply conceded. Changhyun gripped his weapon tightly, reflecting on how Full Bloom had bestowed a fresh talent after a significant accomplishment, indicating he now possessed an unfamiliar skill. Given that, Changhyun assailed the creature, leaped skyward, and yelled, "Heads!" The recently acquired ability, Calling Your Attack, empowered the hero to utter a random skill or target's name, thereby boosting his assaults. This fresh capability enabled the hero to cleave the clone's head, signifying his triumph. As his friend registered surprise, the thought occurred to him that he found it astonishing for defeating a bully to count as an accomplishment. What truly fascinated him, however, was his lack of this particular talent during his former existence. This peculiar ability, compelling him to vocalize the target's name, would undoubtedly make him appear strange to onlookers. During dinner that evening, an announcement was made regarding the protagonist's participation in an audition for a hunter survival program. He confirmed this to his parents, explaining his desire to demonstrate his worth, since he was now eligible to enroll in Hunter's Next Generation, a reality program designed to discover and train future hunters. Although his concerned mother expressed that the contest would prove intense, given its divisional nature, his father insisted their son ought to seize the opportunity, which prompted his wife to criticize him for a similar gamble that led his business to collapse, thereby sparking a dispute before their child. Changhyun detailed that victory would provide him with a custom-crafted weapon, a substantial monetary reward, and either academy admission or placement on a Division III team. His mother remarked that such outcomes were expected, considering the intense nature of the reality program. Nevertheless, her son joyfully declared his intention to exert maximum effort, causing both parents to be astonished, and consequently they consented to his participation. However, his mother cautioned him not to be surprised by a potential loss. The protagonist was acutely aware of the contest's intensity, given that this program served to identify top contenders for the National Hunter League. Consequently, certain inequities became apparent to the highest-ranked participant, considering the television program's objective was to choose the premier newcomer. He sought to prevent his parents' worry, considering his past life included many tournament wins, so he was confident he would easily overcome mere beginners. Our hero then appeared, wielding 2 guns, as he undertook the 3-minute clone test in Hunters, the Next Generation, which he effortlessly completed. Prior to this, 3 individuals were seen discussing their imminent access to the applications. Judge Arajo questioned Minsuk of Hunters, Next Generation about his decision to accept the judge position after previously declining it. Minsuk Lee explained that despite his international success, he wished to concentrate on his home country, hoping to discover a gifted amateur. The third judge, Suyop Min, countered that if Minsuk Lee's claims were true, he should be competing in the pro leagues, and that the academy already produced excellent amateurs. Minsuk Lee responded by stating that truly talented individuals were often eccentric and would only excel with proper guidance. Arajo then informed the federal judge that their focus should be on the contestants, not the league. She suggested her perspective would shift if she witnessed Ithan. Once the television program's website was accessed, the protagonist started reviewing how this broadcast aimed to discover individuals who would define upcoming hunter competitions. His primary worry centered on the initial tryout being a written examination. Noticing the extensive detail in the inquiries, Changhyun presumed these would undoubtedly appeal to scholarly participants. The initial query concerned his profession prior to becoming a hunter, to which he responded he possessed none. The subsequent question inquired about his favored approach to group problem solving. He clarified that he consistently assumes leadership, compelling others to follow. Afterward, the main character consumed some water prior to proceeding. The hero found himself in a difficult predicament. He had anticipated simple tryouts, but the written examination proved rather challenging. He He felt confident he could rectify this setback through a possible hands-on assessment, then unexpectedly discovered an interesting element, since gaining entry to the audition's third segment required clicking a hyperlink. The moment he activated the control, he was abruptly transported to a different location, prompting him to consider that a hunter's abilities stem from their character and background, which piqued his curiosity given the astonishing nature of this capability. The youth, now solitary in his chamber, started contemplating this power's essence, as it detailed the requirement to overcome waves of clones within a 3-minute time frame. The system indicated that the protagonist's armament would manifest from his mental imagery, prompting him to ponder, before a grin appeared as he had forged twin handguns. A practical test's prospect delighted the hero. During his former existence, the protagonist favored dual firearms, which he infused with arcane energy. However, he understood this test would not permit such an action. The moment the trial commenced, our hero swiftly engaged his all-seeing eye. Consequently, a primary wave of clones, considerably less formidable than tanker clones, materialized, signaling the trial's commencement. Following this, Changyeon directed his weapons, then commenced firing upon them with maximum speed. Concurrently, an observer deemed the situation outrageous. Judge Arajo inquired of Suyak Min whether he too found this conduct unacceptable. Suyak Min concurred, prompting her to declare that the test's objective was not this, after observing our hero's actions, since in her view, Changyeon was cheating, given that any hunter could eliminate the clones with firearms. Arajo further stated that his responses to the written test's questions were likewise unsatisfactory. Her anger was evident. The youth's lack of seriousness with the question made him troublesome. Agreement was his only option, since hunters typically did not use firearms. Such armaments prove largely ineffective against monsters, given the difficulty of infusing them with mana, which vanished from projectiles once fired, leading most hunters to favor melee armaments. Extended-range armaments existed within the hunter leagues, yet these were restricted to slower options like bows and crossbows. Min Suyak Lee believed that merely an individual with Ethan's caliber could rapidly discharge numerous mana-infused projectiles, thus expressing his fascination with the protagonist, which also piqued his colleague's interest. The second judge was stunned when the third concurred with the initial assessment, since the youth, despite his intentions, had indeed discovered an unconventional method to exploit the regulations for his benefit. Min Suyak Lee concurred, suggesting that if his display was unsatisfactory, they could address it in subsequent stages, then added that the protagonist and Ethan possessed distinct approaches concerning weaponry. Arjo requested clarification, though he remained perplexed. The judge speculated that the young man could perceive a future for firearms within the hunter leagues, but he swiftly discarded that notion. Min Suyak Lee started pondering, as he observed the protagonist's choice to complete the remaining test segments using a solitary gun. The judge earnestly wished his assessment of Changyeon was incorrect. Concurrently, an inquiry arose regarding Jisoo's condition. Doo-jin Kim detailed the main protagonist's lack of severe injuries, which struck the man as peculiar, given that the boy, despite lacking close-quarters combat prowess, possessed a potent ability, yet his adversary sustained only minor harm. Although the man appeared quite distressed, he chose to concentrate on the boy before him, inquiring about his participation in the TV show, and stated his intention to inform him, as it would require some time. The individual in the blue shirt, consumed by eagerness, asked Doo-jin Kim if his companion who battled Jisoo had also joined the TV show. So, he responded that he was uncertain, having not yet posed the question. The coach then let the young man go, mentioning his preparations for the show. The young man promptly departed. The coach started considering the situation's increasing intrigue. While Doo-jin Kim moved along the corridor, he also pondered the grabby wielder's participation in the show, a development that would heighten excitement. Bright sunlight illuminated the reality TV show's main stadium. Reaching its entrance, our hero reflected on the years since his career began within this stadium, and therefore he chose to approach the familiar venue once more, ready to confront upcoming new challenges. Hunter Leagues comprised 3 divisions. The top one held its matches in towers, whereas the other 2 utilized a virtual reality stadium. Initially, our hero struggled to comprehend the construction of such enormous venues. However, after observing today's audience, he understood that such large gatherings were possible due to events like this reality TV program. Within the audience, a focused participant in the Hunters program, from the next generation, Hang Yeol-yoon, remained quiet. Meanwhile, Hyeju Yu, another individual, patiently awaited the event's start. Concurrently, Min Sung-jang, a third participant, surveyed the stadium with his gaze. Chang-hyun, pondering the show's existence prior to his career and previous life, was astonished to find many familiar faces. However, he was surprised to see familiar individuals among the spectators, several possessing significant potential. This sparked his curiosity regarding the event's victor and his own past, especially since he intended to secure victory this time. Abruptly, Dojin Kim summoned Chang-hyun, signaling him from the audience beside a vacant chair. As the hero took the seat beside him, the boy inquired about his well-being, stating he had expected his hospital stay to be extended, which made the protagonist understand that he likely appeared quite hurt to his companions during the restaurant incident. Dojin Kim shared that the grabby wielder, currently on probation, was projected to make a full recovery from his recent battle within 3 weeks, sparking the hero's interest. His confusion deepened when the bully was spotted among the contestants. His friend then clarified his obligation, stating that professional teams utilized this program to identify promising academy students, making it crucial for him to perform well. The broadcast had commenced, as mist started to envelop the arena. The announcer declared that fresh adventurers were always accepted, then greeted all viewers to Hunters, the next generation, asserting that the hopeful futures of these novices were on the verge of beginning as the mist cleared, with all performers now directing their attention toward him. Following this announcement, a simulated combat zone materialized within the arena. The announcer proclaimed this program to be unparalleled globally, predicting it would reveal the ultimate hunter of tomorrow, and that every contestant had outdone countless other awakeners across the nation. He then urged the audience to applaud the aspiring hunters, noting their inclusion in the 2% chosen as the country's future hunters, before proceeding to introduce the 3 judges, with the initial one being Ara Jo, a renowned Korean hunter who had secured victory in the National League on 3 occasions. The second judge introduced was Min Seok Lee, a top Korean hunter active in international leagues, prior to the third judge, Soo-yeok Min, was then introduced, a prominent figure domestically. Dojin Kim found it surprising to witness the top Korean hunter among the judges, considering his usual involvement in international leagues. The main character understood these 2 judges held genuine significance, possessing a similar standing to his own during his prior life, yet he felt confident he could outdo both individuals. The announcer then detailed how the amateur contestants would participate in challenges created by the judges, and the individual achieving first place would receive $360,000 in addition to a custom weapon forged at Mora's workshop. This news astonished the hero. Standard creations from Mora's workshop held immeasurable value, so a custom-made weapon was even more astounding, intensifying his shock. Our hero then considered that this might enable him to regain his peak form much faster than previously imagined. Arajo proceeded to detail the first challenge for the 100 chosen from 4,450 applicants, intending to ascertain genuine worthiness. Subsequently, she enthusiastically described how the young participants would face a survival challenge inside a dungeon where seasoned hunters had previously fought. The competition concludes when 80 contestants are removed. She then stated that within the Land of the Lost Souls dungeon, the top scorer would earn a small advantage for the subsequent trial. Immediately, the 100 individuals were transported inside the dungeon to begin their initial test. During his teleportation, the hero felt a surge of excitement. Upon arrival, our hero stepped into the Land of the Lost Souls. He promptly started surveying his surroundings, recalling how this very dungeon hosted finals in his previous existence. Chang-yun possessed complete knowledge of the Land of the Lost Souls, including its characteristics and layout, along with its fundamental systems. He was also privy to the secret dungeon's existence. Given this, a thrilled grin appeared on his face as he contemplated his subsequent move. Arajo felt confident that the hero could not manipulate the game's regulations to his advantage in a survival scenario. His easy success in the practical test had proven his intellect. Arajo had not considered him a genius. Lady, however, now focused as survival challenges demanded many essential hunter skills, an imposter could not possibly achieve victory. Arajo's objective was to prove to the young man that the League of Hunters warranted serious consideration. The 2 others started discussing the amateur's talent and their colleagues' clever challenge selection, which would retain only skilled hunters. Then something unexpected caught their attention. Observing the display, they discovered a hunter was exiting the combat zone, prompting the 3 judges to investigate. The display subsequently showed the unauthorized player was our hero, standing before a peculiar structure. Chang-hyun displayed a wild grin after seeing our hero on the monitor. Lady was perplexed by his knowledge of this place, for it contained the dungeon's artifact. Dungeons held various hidden valuable items known as artifacts, and acquiring an artifact sometimes guaranteed a victory. Such a revelation caused Arajo to panic. Even top-tier Division 1 competitors lacked knowledge of this dungeon, as it remained undisclosed to the public and certainly to amateurs. Therefore, this young participant could not possibly know about the concealed artifact. Minsip Lee quietly suggested to his associates that intervention might be necessary if issues arose, but she insisted no problems existed. She then elaborated that the contestant had entered a hidden section of this simulated dungeon, a place unfamiliar to all and absent from any maps. Hearing this, the man inquired about the contents within this secluded zone. Following a brief pause, Arajo revealed its contents included ether, a substance prohibited by the Hunters League because of its immense power, which completely astonished the two other judges. Arajo stated that the artifact was irremovable unless the match concluded, but as the environment was virtual, its use was restricted solely to that space. Minsip Lee then noted that a keeper needed to reside within the secret area alongside the artifact. These guardians protected the artifact, their strength directly correlating with the item they guarded. The woman, now feeling less anxious, chose to examine the item. Following this discussion, the judges initiated a closer view within the hidden dungeon, where they discovered a gleaming structure. Q, a monster, served as the hidden artifact's guardian. After pressing the correct stone, Changyun felt relief when the secret path became accessible. Although his memory was vague, the hero successfully found the hidden dungeon, considering that defeating the keeper would grant him access to the powerful artifact, thereby securing his triumph in the first challenge upon entering the hidden dungeon. At that moment, the keeper started glowing intensely, prior to reforming itself and firing a potent beam toward the hero, who evaded it just in time. The hero was taken aback, comprehending he would have been defeated by the keeper had he lacked his prior life's encounter. The hero remembered this cube's classification as a futuristic apparatus unearthed from a tower's remnants. Changyun had previously bested it in the decisive contest, claiming victory. Since he was its discoverer, the forbidden artifact became usable by him. Consequently, he imbued his sword with magic, transforming it into a crowbar, a transformation made possible by his arcane weapon transmutation, enabling him to alter his armaments. Changyun recognized the fundamental concepts held true in both his previous and current lives. With this understanding, he lunged at the creature, planning to assault it with his crowbar, and then wedged his metal implement into the miniature's openings, cube, subsequently forcing them apart. The hero then delivered a kick to the dislodged component and struck it with his crowbar, then performed a flip to establish separation. Upon landing, Changyun felt satisfaction from securing a piece of the creature, yet he considered the difficulty of overcoming a keeper given his present strength. This self-reforming cube, it turned out, served as a mechanism guarding the relic, meaning its defeat was possible for anyone who understood its attack sequence. Suddenly, the keeper transformed, manifesting as a pair of massive hands. The hero narrowly avoided the creature's attempt to crush him between its enormous palms. Despite knowing the attack sequence, the player was shocked by his brush with death, yet a grin appeared as he realized he had seized his chance when the keeper started to fracture, then abruptly disintegrated. Just as the protagonist dodged a crushing blow, he slipped the pilfered fragment between the massive palms. Predictably, a segment from a powerful creature possesses comparable strength. The fragment's power matched the whole. The youth retrieved a fragment from the keeper's remains, pondering how evident it seemed that the creature would self-destruct by crushing a part of its own form. Consequently, the protagonist resolved to obtain the potent artifact. A golden shrine held the ether, contained within a lavish chest. Even though he understood it was merely a digital replica, the hero still felt pleased to behold this item once more following a long period. All events unfolded precisely as the skilled player had foreseen. In this manner, he obtained the artifact from the Land of the Lost Souls dungeon. Changyun promptly chose to infuse it into his weapon. Yet at that moment, something caught his eye. This sight brought him immense happiness. As the system recognized defeating a keeper as an achievement, he acquired a skill enabling him to replicate the artifact's power beyond the dungeon. Changyun promptly opted to test the skill, manifesting pistols. The hero promptly discharged the weapon's chambers, creating 3 clear marks upon the dungeon wall. The brilliant player felt immense joy, realizing he could recover his weapon far earlier than anticipated. Previously, the hero's ample mana reserves enabled him to utilize firearms through generating standard mana bullets. His acquisition skill, Full Bloom, though currently inactive, boosted his advancement but also led to diminished mana reserves compared to his norm. Nevertheless, while testing his new pistols, he started believing the recently discovered artifact would compensate for his mana deficiency. After inspecting the wall, the hero understood he could manage pistols, but not heavy artillery. Despite this, a smile appeared, as his present abilities were ample for him to forge his path. Concurrently, observing this via the monitor, the three arbiters found themselves astonished and silent. Arajo felt shock witnessing the youth employ firearms once more by utilizing the artifact. Consequently, the second arbiter remarked concerning the hero's enigmatic skill in avoiding the keeper's assault, which had captured his attention. The third arbiter clarified that the keeper's mechanical nature made its actions predictable, but questioned if the hero could truly perceive this sequence. Arajo stated that only professionals like them could achieve this, and given a beginner's inability, she concluded he possessed a clairvoyant ability. However, this wasn't the sole point of interest, but also the method the hero employed to defeat the keeper, by employing a fragment of its own structure against itself, a truly astonishing and bewildering act. Her frustration was evident as she frowned. This brought to mind her colleagues' words that the gardening eccentric ones were the truly gifted hunters. This ultimately left her feeling vexed. Meanwhile, within the realm of lost spirits, a youthful individual swiftly traversed from limb to limb, leaping with maximum speed. It was none other than Hangyol Yan. The young man glanced upwards and, observing his top kill score and #1 ranking, felt satisfied. The strategy of Team 1 from the capital's private academy was unfolding as planned. Hangyol Yan landed, considering the initial trial would conclude with just a few additional eliminations. The young man then perceived that no one could challenge him in a solo battle while he traversed the forest, when sudden sharp gunshots rang out, startling the young hunter. Concurrently, the hero questioned if his arrival was delayed, given that 20 participants needed elimination prior to the round's conclusion. The hero considered that eliminating every participant would secure triumph, but realizing he couldn't locate them all promptly, he opted to pursue 5th place. As he resolved to eliminate every participant he encountered, an unusual detail captured his notice. The protagonist recognized the previous aggressor. Jisoo remained concealed among the dense foliage, and when a contestant entered his effective distance, he tightened his hand, preparing to ensnare the youth using an unexpected gravity attack. Jisoo smirked after dispatching the opponent, then emerged from his cover, moving toward the impact crater he had recently formed, only to feel a sudden tap on his shoulder from the protagonist who had defeated him earlier, sending a shiver down his spine. Jisoo attempted to pivot and confront the hero, but collapsed to the ground in terror. The leading competitor stated he needed a service from the aggressor, but after hearing the request, the youth felt disgusted and enraged by the hero. Changhyun was displeased by this response. He amicably stated his purpose was to seek Jisoo's assistance, but the young man displayed his arrogance. The bully's anger flared upon hearing this, so he unleashed his power to assault the hero as gravity struck at the final moment. The hero evaded it without injury. Changhyun desired the youth to employ his gravity attack over a larger zone with less force to eliminate every contestant simultaneously, but Jisoo appeared unwilling to comply. Given this, only persuasion remained in the hero's arsenal as he charged the young man, yelling, "Heads," creating a strong sense of déjà vu. So Changhyun persisted in hitting Jisoo until Jisoo finally yielded. The protagonist was questioned by the bully about his observations, and he proposed an alliance in return. This offer was instantly rejected by the greedy wielder. The protagonist, smiling, then materialized a firearm. He aimed it and fired a shot near the young man's leg. Changhyun subsequently aimed it at the youth's head, declaring that elimination would be necessary if compliance was not chosen. Following a brief moment of thought, Jisoo was compelled to assist the protagonist, which brought satisfaction to him. Deeper within the dungeon, two youthful competitors engaged in a blade clash when two shadowy figures abruptly neared them. The spearmen and swordsmen became targets of a surprise gravity assault. The hero's gunfire eliminated both, which left Jisoo quite annoyed. The pair started to depart, but someone observed their movement. Then a flying blade launched towards them, which they quickly detected, startling them, prompting the gravity wielder to activate his skill to halt the airborne sword's trajectory. Changhyun displayed a smile when he noticed his firearm's loud noise drew other contestants. Consequently, the duo stood before a 4-person team, which included the skilled Hangyol Yun. Since the Hunter League operates as a team sport, certain players excelled defensively, and although the bully's gravitational skill possessed offensive power, its optimal application involved team combat support, leading the judges to question whether the protagonist would eliminate Jisoo, a player who had secured a leaderboard position. Arijo clarified its improbability, noting such an action would have occurred earlier. The trio of judges then observed the two youths engaging in conversation. When the female judge grasped the young man's recruitment of the bully for assistance, her male counterpart again found this choice intriguing. Min-seok Lee then speculated the boy might evaluate other Awakener's abilities, yet he swiftly discarded that notion. Soo-yup Min suggested this partnership would prove highly effective, given the protagonist's ability to eliminate contestants Jisoo had immobilized using his firearms. However, Min-seok Lee declared this pairing held more imperfections than initially apparent, explaining their opposition included a formidable hunter. Concurrently, the pair encountered a group of 4 adversaries. The hero then pondered the optimal method for overcoming an adversary in combat, concluding it involved strategy, teamwork, or superior gear. Achieving triumph most effectively meant overpowering an opponent through numerical superiority. Possessing merely a single gravitational ability user for aid, the protagonist's defeat seemed inevitable. The 4-person team's strategy became clear to the hero. At that moment, a flying sword forced Changhyun to evade. The premier combatant declared this fight was unlike any he'd had recently, noting it was new for his opponent. The skilled hunter announced his intention to eliminate the hero, given the hero's use of firearms, then added that it was merely professional conduct as he launched his armament once more. This development excited the hero, because in his previous existence, the mature Hangyul Young had been capable of wielding sword telekinesis over numerous blades simultaneously. However, his younger self was limited to controlling a single one, which would complicate handling the approaching projectiles. The blade wielder quickly sought cover behind a tree to protect himself from the projectiles. When Jisoo started moving in the opposite direction, the hero observed that the talented individual was depending on his strategy more than his mature self. At that moment, the protagonist dodged the approaching sword slash. He then struck the remainder of his assailant with his firearms, remarking that the foe remained an inexperienced hunter. Changhyun moved stealthily behind the hunter, stating that a firearm user such as he would assuredly strike his mark from close quarters prior to firing, bringing the foe down. Subsequently, the youth commenced running while the hovering blade pursued him, leading him to activate his all-seeing ability, which revealed the concealed locations of the other hunters, whom he intended to eliminate once the skilled opponent attempted to protect himself. Following this realization, he launched himself skyward and directed his firearm toward the initial competitor before finally bringing him down with a shot. His attention then shifted, and he instantly noticed the archer, who appeared visibly distressed. A solitary trigger pull resulted in the girl's elimination. In this manner, the protagonist had dispatched his 7th opponent. He then started contemplating that he remained the sole participant while discharging his firearm, aiming at the airborne blade, causing it to drop. The weapon belonged to none other than the annoyed, skilled hunter who had retrieved his sword. The main character twirled his firearms, subsequently firing a volley of shots, but Hang Yul-yun successfully employed his blade to deflect everyone. Despite the firearm's reduced speed from his mana deficiency, the hero found himself admiring his opponent's quick reflexes. However, Changyun soon realized his own speed surpassed the others, launching a fresh volley of projectiles. On this occasion, the skilled hunter struggled to parry the approaching assaults, thus the youth continued firing as the blade wielder remained on the defensive. The young man then concentrated on a deflected projectile. Utilizing his all-seeing ability, the young man employed his weapons to strike it, propelling it back at great velocity. This time, the projectile spun, being a trick shot. The hunter faced an imminent impact from the bullet, who found defense difficult. Changyun then believed victory was secured, but at that moment, an alarm sounded. Immediately, the 20 survivors from the first round teleported onto the podium, which left the protagonist quite annoyed, realizing he had nearly eliminated a formidable foe. Following this, the judges appeared on screen. Joe expressed gratitude to the contestants for proving themselves as hunters, a group representing a small fraction of awakeners. Her colleagues stated they sought not league players, but protective warriors, similar to the original hunters who risked their lives on journeys, before adding that the initial round had surely shown only a fraction of the true meaning of hunter. Since the next round would be unveiled in 7 days at the stadium, the participants were instructed to consider their weaknesses and utilize the complementary training room. However, once the ultimate results displayed on the monitor, the bothersome main character found himself completely bewildered, since a careful examination of the rankings revealed his 5th place finish, achieved by defeating 7 rivals, a fact that greatly annoyed him. At that moment, he became aware of his accomplished task, so Full Bloom presented him with a duplicate of the fabled item. Immediately afterward, his companion came up to the hero and mentioned his achievement of securing 5th position. Changhyun questioned the youth about his successful qualification, which was affirmed by the youth, who then explained that the protagonist's use of pistols had captivated everyone before inquiring about their acquisition. The hero's evasive response appeased his friend, who subsequently questioned how he achieved their full operation, just as a voice summoned the protagonist, requesting his readiness for an upcoming interview. Soon afterward, once the camera was positioned, the interviewer directed the young man to face his direction. The interviewer's initial query concerned the hero's participation in the program. The young man expressed his conviction that he was the ideal candidate. The interviewer praised the hero for advancing past the initial stage, then requested a commentary, which would confirm his progression despite a subpar showing. Changhyun was subsequently queried about any rivals encountered in the first round. However, to the interviewer's surprise, he asserted that no one had caught his eye, and while he remained cautious regarding the sword levitator, he could not deem him a formidable foe. Upon hearing this, the interviewer challenged his statement, noting he hadn't placed first, prompting the protagonist to confidently declare that true enjoyment came only from leading the rankings from the outset. This unusual self-assurance intrigued both the interviewer and cameraman, leading them to continue the discussion. Afterward, within the dining area, Do-jin Kim appeared irritated, prompting Changhyun to invite him to share his thoughts, leading him to disclose his irritation with the interview, which led the hero to inquire about the specific questions. The youth clarified his frustration that the interviewer attempted to draw comparisons between him and his elder. This sentiment was fully graspable by the hero, who also found Jisoo unyielding, even with consistent teasing. The protagonist was stunned when Do-jin Kim confirmed to the interviewer that he viewed him as a competitor. This caused Changhyun to wish the gravity wielder had been chosen for the role. Do-jin Kim then questioned the legendary player regarding his interview, and he clarified that the interviewers posed challenging questions, such as his forecast for the final rounds. This piqued his friend's interest. Changhyun stated he had naturally foreseen his own victory. Do-jin Kim then shared his prediction, naming either Han Gyu-yu or Han Gil-yun, the Academy's top talents even within its elite squad, as the victors of the initial round, because both were crucial team players capable of effortlessly advancing into professional leagues. The blonde individual assured his friend he would comprehend his perspective if he had witnessed their combat within the Academy. Consequently, the protagonist angrily challenged his friend for believing those 2 alleged prodigies surpassed him. This left Do-jin Kim astonished, and Changhyun asserted that his perspective remained unaltered. He would never achieve anything significant, which necessitated a shift in his outlook as he rose from the table. The hero opted for training initially, then instructed the younger individual to eat. Leaving the cafeteria, Changhyun understood his prior severity with his friend had caused no ill effect. He observed that nearly all individuals shared comparable potential. Success in this context hinged on one's resolve to achieve objectives. The renowned player fully recognized the self-inflicted damage a young person could cause by downplaying their abilities. At that moment, someone touched his shoulder. A young hunter introduced himself as Han Jin, a person consistently defeated in sparring by the sword prodigy he'd faced in round 1, then inquired about his name. The protagonist stated his name and questioned the youth about his purpose for approaching him. Han Jin mentioned the prodigy's exhaustion post-first round, but at that moment, Hang Yol-hyun confirmed they needed to depart. Consequently, he seized his companion by the collar, then apologized for his impolite conduct as he requested the hero to reveal his secret's identity, which perplexed Changhyun. Noticing that both individuals originated from the Academy, the protagonist sensed a positive connection. The protagonist then chose to activate his all-seeing eye, aiming to examine the sword prodigy's statistics, along with those of his companions. Once his cup was discarded, the youth pondered how the Academy student's statistics far exceeded his. He understood clearly that only the artifact had secured his first round win, and the subsequent challenge would prove far tougher. Shortly afterward, the TV show's commentator declared that they would now begin, speaking with enthusiasm. Attention shifted to the 3 judges as they started reviewing the applications. Su Yap Min started examining a student's file from the Academy of the Capital. Ari Jo noted that this youth stood out as the best contestant, being none other than the sword prodigy. During his interview, the youth stated his lifelong ambition was to be a hunter, even after 2 academy entrance exam failures, and he then explained how he persisted, having gained insight from prior errors and understanding the genuine worth of diligent effort. Doo-jin Kim observed the interview intently on his mobile phone. His companion inquired if the broadcast had begun, to which he replied affirmatively, mentioning that technological progress enabled an earlier airing. The protagonist questioned the audience feedback, prompting the blonde individual to disclose that viewers appreciated the prodigy's directness, even with his uninteresting responses. Other participants chose more unusual replies, as noted by the commentator. Soon after, the protagonist appeared on the display. When questioned regarding life's difficulties, the youth asserted that his experiences had been quite straightforward. Following an inquiry about one's approach to group collaboration, our hero declared that he consistently compelled others to adhere to his direction. Upon being asked his motivation for participating in the reality television program, the sword prodigy offered a humble response, whereas the protagonist displayed his conceit. Then, when a query arose concerning a potential competitor emerging in the initial round, neither individual admitted to discovering anyone suitable. At that moment, the display turned entirely dark. Chang Hyun desired to continue his practice, yet his friend expressed a wish to view the initial round segment. However, the main character confirmed he could view the program at a later time. Doo-jin Kim inquired of the main character why only his lower body was being trained. Chang Hyun subsequently posed a rhetorical question concerning his specific function in the game, identified by his friend as a marksman. He proceeded to ask the younger individual about a marksman's most crucial element, which the youth indicated was, but the renowned player asserted that movement capability held equal significance. He confirmed that the exceptional swordsman and other skilled close-range combatants possessed either rapid movement or a distant strike that menaced marksmen. Consequently, the protagonist required his agility to equal or exceed that of a close combatant. At that moment, an individual who had just arrived remarked that this perspective was intriguing. However, merely a handful of strategies existed within the Korean hunter leaves for marksman elimination. The man sought the boy's thoughts concerning his assertion. Chang Hyun promptly understood he was not with a common individual, given that access to this facility was granted to him. Chang Hyun then clarified that foreign teams consistently prioritize marksmen, emphasizing their vital contribution. The hero then stated this justification was enough for him to exclusively train his lower body. This response amused the old man, as it implied the young man believed he would be targeted by enemy male fighters for being a marksman, and he burst into laughter, finding it quite amusing before regaining his composure. He then informed the protagonist that pride had caused the downfall of many. The old man, who declared he would observe our protagonist, advised him to consider his extensive experience, then departed. The 2 young awakeners were left puzzled, unable to identify the old man. Even so, as he resumed his training, Chang Hyun stated his intention to impress him, knowing his performance would be watched. Later, the subordinate checked on her boss, who inquired about the crucial aspects of marksman, which she identified as damage and support skills. The chairman, Jun-taek Lee, who led the Hunter Association as its first-generation hunter, clarified that her understanding was mistaken. Consequently, the subordinate suggested accuracy as the primary element. However, the chairman promptly dismissed him before he could elaborate. This prompted him to remember a past conversation where he questioned someone about exclusively developing their lower body. During his younger years, he inquired of an archer whether mana training was planned, and the archer responded that the crucial characteristic for his position involved the lower body, which puzzled his companion. The archer clarified for Jun-taek that marksmen consistently became monster targets due to their perceived frailty, necessitating swift movement. The straightforwardness of this logic astonished the young man, prompting the archer to add that marksmen face ruin if their concealed position is revealed, and he wouldn't grasp this as a male fighter, causing him to finally comprehend in the present the significance of mobility in sports as well. The chairman was acutely aware that this principle seldom found application within his home country's league, which had seen most of its top hunters vanish, yet the idea held true for both elite and international leagues, prompting the chairman to consider the young man's global perspective. Even though he had not yet entered the Hunter League, the elder pondered whether the protagonist truly understood his capabilities or merely displayed them accurately. Meanwhile, Changyun, upon checking his status window, understood that his dormant full bloom allowed for a considerably quicker progression than what he experienced during his first life. Full bloom primarily boosts stat development and bestows abilities as recognition for accomplishments. Activation of this extraordinary ability also significantly enhanced an individual's stats. Dojin Kim eventually set aside the weights, then inquired of his friend regarding his post-workout intentions and if he had any suggestions for him. The protagonist understood that his friend, an academy student, did not require such intense training, given his already impressive stats, so he stated that he had no advice for him, as their bond was not yet strong enough, a point the younger individual comprehended. Following this, the protagonist proposed a sparring match to his friend, to take place soon within the training room. The two middle schoolers stood opposite each other, armed with swords. Dojin Kim expressed surprise that the marksman possessed sword skills, prompting Changyun to clarify that he held some familiarity with it. The blonde combatant understood a pistol fight meant defeat, but he felt assured of triumph in a sword duel. Following this thought, the two smirked, then rushed toward Dojin Kim. Instantly, their blades collided. Their skills proved equal. Observing this, the blonde combatant started shaking, and then, glancing at his hands, he chose to retreat a few paces. Dojin Kim found himself completely perplexed, since even though Changyun wielded a common sword, he struggled to contend with him. Consequently, the hero activated arcane weapon transmutation on his blade, transforming its form. Noticing Changyun had fashioned a spear, the younger combatant started grasping the disparity. The gap between them was clear. Changyun then moved his weapon, a block his friend instantly performed. Dojin Kim faced a difficult challenge, realizing his adversary possessed greater reach. The younger combatant started dreading the outcome as his foe reshaped his weapon again. Changyun, surprisingly, now wielded a massive sword. Observing the immense weapon, Dojin Kim could not devise a method to overcome it. The enormous sword was then swung. Soon, the blonde individual felt weary as the protagonist addressed him. Changyun asked Dojin Kim for his thoughts, given their declared rivalry. Dojin Kim responded that their abilities were similar, a claim the hero dismissed as absurd, explaining he wasn't exerting full effort, which surprised the boy. Changyun appeared quite earnest. This caused the younger fighter to feel frustrated, observing the vast disparity separating him from his friend. The protagonist then explained the cause of his opponent's defeat, remarking that the other fighter had assumed an unsuitable role. Changyun then assessed the young man's strengths, contrasting them against the sword. He clarified that his friend possessed excellent reflexes and a sharp mind, traits ill-suited for his chosen weapon, and therefore the hero suggested changing his primary weapon to something better matching his swiftness, such as a rapier. Subsequently, the hero transformed his personal sword into that specific blade. The legendary player advised that Dojin Kim ought to consistently overpower his opponent through a flurry of rapid thrusts. This astonished the young man, as he pondered if mastering the rapier was truly within his grasp. Later that day, upon leaving the training ground, they both started discussing the rapier. At that moment, the hero observed someone ridiculing a hunter who felt proud after a spar against a weak academy student. Seeing the bad mother displayed on a screen, the hero became utterly shocked. This implied the young man had been watching their sparring match. Upon realizing he was the awakener in question, the hero concluded the bad mother held no affection for him. Changyun, finding such conduct unacceptable, declared the young man incapable of defeating even the weaker students. This incensed the bully, prompting the protagonist to escalate his provocations. Before suggesting they resolve their dispute through combat, the bad mother promptly agreed to this. However, at that moment, the hero became aware that this young man's score matched his own in the first stage, and his results were quite respectable. The hero understood that relying solely on his own strength would guarantee defeat, given his significantly inferior stats. Nevertheless, the irritated hero felt confident he could secure victory without his signature weapon. Soon afterward, they stood opposite each other within the training room. The hero knew his adversary, Yeon-sung, ranked among the top new recruits, and that his firearms held no advantage, their nature no longer concealed. Yeon-sung proposed they begin their contest, a challenge the hero promptly agreed to, considering his triumph was uncertain. Nonetheless, the protagonist desired to finish it, initiating the first strike, yet the young man swiftly dodged. Once a certain space was established, Yeon-sung hurled a pair of knives toward the hero, which were swiftly deflected by his sword. Observing this, the antagonist displayed a grin as a second pair of knives aimed for the hero's back. This surprised Chang Hyun, who understood evasion was impossible. At that instant, the thrown objects were repelled, bringing relief to the hero when the artifact's replica formed a protective barrier, saving him. However, he remained without a strategy to defeat the knife wielder. Jeonsung employed telekinesis to direct his thrown weapons. Noticing his assault had been inexplicably repelled, the young man presumed his adversary possessed a hidden ability. The hero then materialized his own throwing knife, launching it toward the bully. The bully considered this amusing, believing his ability would effortlessly stop the blade. As with the previous object, its trajectory was halted. The situation unfolded precisely as the hero's all-seeing eye had foreseen. Chang Hyun subsequently drew additional knives and hurled them at his opponent, pondering how the initial assault had managed to negate the bully's skill. However, Yeon-sung, taken by surprise, responded swiftly, which astonished our hero, since Yeon-sung had employed his skill to halt 4 projectiles. Still, the bully ought not to be capable of neutralizing numerous targets with his skill so rapidly, implying the knife he barely controlled was destined to strike him as he concentrated on focused on others. The telepath was then struck, signifying the protagonist's triumph. The whole match was observed quietly. An individual inquired of the judge if this participant was his predicted first-place finisher. Min-suk Lee requested the blonde individual's perspective, and the man repositioned his spectacles prior to activating his eye of analysis skill. The man reported that the protagonist displayed significant tactical acumen and a deceptive nature, though his stats were rather ordinary by eye of analysis. This outcome aligned with Min-suk Lee's forecast. The blonde individual discerned the judge possessed insight into the prodigy's capabilities, remarking that triumph would have been unattainable without foreknowledge of the adversary's telekinesis. Min-suk Lee speculated the youth held an ability akin to the blonde's, or perhaps Samnak Kim's, a pioneer among hunters. The eye of analysis represented a potent ability granted to merely 2 persons. The blonde individual suggested the judge's assessment of the youth was too high, yet Min-suk Lee argued his capabilities were likely underestimated, considering he had found the hidden dungeon inside the survival game, prior to mentioning his precise attack on the clone circuits during the practical test. The judge stated that individuals would mistake him for the legendary Samnak Kim if he joined the Division 1 League. He subsequently inquired if the blonde individual wished to mentor the gifted youth, to which he agreed, since Eye of Analysis could show statistics, but not abilities. Nevertheless, the youth accurately foresaw his adversary's ability and devised a strategy to defeat it. The individual remembered the cleverness of the knife maneuver as he questioned whether the boy had already been assigned to a squad. The judge confirmed the situation was regrettable, since the reality show's sponsors had made the decision, which frustrated him, given his resolve to acquire the youth. Concurrently, within the training room, the protagonist felt puzzled as he struggled to grasp the system's definition of an achievement. Despite this, he chose to patiently uncover this mystery. Do-jin Kim excitedly declared his new weapon could defeat our hero, but the hero dismissed it as absurd and departed, prompting the blonde individual to note his increased strength. Do-jin Kim asserted his swordsmanship had reached peak proficiency, a fact our hero acknowledged, given the effectiveness of his guidance. Nevertheless, a significant level disparity persisted between them. Following this exchange, the 2 middle school students left the training area. Inside the classroom, all cameras had been prepared. At that moment, the entrance swung open and an individual stepped inside, revealed to be Do-jin Kim. The protagonist pondered why they were present in a classroom setting. The classroom environment suggested a lecture was imminent. At that moment, the 3 judges appeared. Ajo offered a salute, expressing her wish for their diligent training over the past 7 days, noting some individuals might have advanced significantly, while others may not have experienced similar fortune. Nevertheless, she believed the youth still faced a considerable journey ahead. A colleague elaborated that, despite their inherent potential, they remained considerably weaker than professional hunters. Consequently, the judges had assembled a group of instructors. Once the educators entered the classroom, the judges announced that every appointed teacher had competed in the top league and achieved many successes, and these instructors would guide the youths in forming suitable roles prior to a 3-on-3 trial match, mirroring the hunter leagues. At that moment, the protagonist experienced an overwhelming sensation. The teacher's mana manipulation affected all 19 participants, causing him to feel impressed. Sang-Jin Lee, the first instructor, declared he disliked individuals who were lazy or lacked resolve, then firmly stated his hatred for arrogance, a trait which prompted him to insist students display humility and avoid mocking the lessons. The judges then clarified that the initial elimination round served to assign appropriate roles to each young participant, and the protagonist was the first, identified as a close-range combatant. This announcement left Changyun utterly bewildered. Subsequently, the gunner remained unable to comprehend his classification as a close-range combatant. He then observed that the sword prodigy was present, along with his friends, all of whom were hunters possessing significant potential. A trainer subsequently arrived at the practice area before loudly declaring they must discard all prior knowledge, as everyone present was deemed inferior to Division 3 hunters, irrespective of their academy affiliation. The trainer subsequently detailed that during formal competitions, participants utilize abilities and gear such as air anchor and air bit to enhance their effectiveness, noting that while new recruits remained earthbound, even the lowest tier of hunters could engage in aerial combat. Changyun then considered how such methods would create a more spectacular display through the use of advanced mana-powered devices. The trainer subsequently stated he was unable to instruct any melee combatant incapable of mastering these tools. Following this declaration, the training commenced. Several participants became ensnared by the cables, causing our protagonist to reflect on the initial challenge of adaptation, despite having achieved complete command over such devices in his past existence. Consequently, he chose to ascertain if his necessary reflexes remained intact. However, precisely as he prepared to begin his practice, something caught his attention. The instructor was shouting at a participant, criticizing their feebleness, especially considering they were destined to become one of the nation's future hunters. The instructor then faced another individual caught in their cable, declaring they would not last in Division 3. The protagonist found concentration difficult amidst the surrounding noise. At that moment, he observed his companions grappling to master the technique, an entirely predictable outcome given the lack of proper instruction, so he requested the blonde individual descend, noting their incorrect execution, arousing the young man's curiosity. Subsequently, he touched down. Dojin Kim admonished his companion for neglecting practice before the imminent examination, advising him to focus on his own performance, as failure seemed certain, prompting the young man to inquire about the correct method. The protagonist clarified that achieving stability required the swordsman to create a suitably sized rope and infuse it with consistent mana, then instructed him to focus on his core, because once airborne, the body's core functions as the center of gravity, prior to him conjuring his own cable, and then he cast it onto the surface. Following a brief period of concentration, the protagonist then leapt skyward, prior to a graceful descent. Changhyun clarified this method offered optimal landing and body control while aloft, emphasizing the need for constant mana circulation. Dojin Kim then remembered his companion's guidance prior to casting his grappling hook towards the structure, concentrating briefly, then elegantly leaping upwards, subsequently achieving a perfect-footed touchdown. The junior was immensely pleased by this outcome, as he felt assured it demonstrated his considerable aptitude, yet at that moment, the teacher started scolding them for their conversation during his discourse. He subsequently noted their lack of resolve, then requested the protagonist's name. Changhyun then identified himself, understanding the man's intent to guide their conduct. The displeased instructor observed that the young man's limited training likely demonstrated his significant ability, which the protagonist promptly acknowledged, considering how he might comply with the teacher's wishes. However, he felt curious about the format of the upcoming aerial combat evaluations, and given the hero's past life, he was inherently more experienced than his instructor, prompting him to consider imparting some wisdom. Following this, the man announced that evaluations would commence soon, then instructed everyone to prepare. Subsequently, the hero's name appearing on the Malif fighter roster piqued someone's interest. The three judges then deliberated on this subject. Vincent Lee believed Arjo had erroneously placed him in an incorrect division. Thus, she clarified that the hero possessed limited knowledge of close-quarters armaments and exhibited excessive arrogance, leading her to assign him to Soundgen. Her colleague then understood her intention to intimidate a novice hunter by deploying an instructor from the top tier. Arjo vehemently stated that retreat was impossible and that no issue existed. Given that a primary objective of the initiative involved educating new participants, she believed a return to reality was essential. This applied to overconfident newcomers, such as our hero. Concurrently, the instructor detailed the nature of the assessment, which involved retrieving the air anchor from its elevated position atop a pole. Prior to the official commencement, Soundgen then shifted his attention, declaring that participants who had been lax must succeed in the trial. Failing that, they would not merit the title of hunter. Changhyun found this amusing, understanding the assessment's true aim was to eliminate him from the contest. The main character subsequently inquired of the instructor what his recompense would be upon successful completion. The Division 1 hunter then stated that if the protagonist succeeded, he could dictate the terms of his lessons. Soundgen, however, felt confident that our hero would inevitably fail, explaining he had positioned the anchor at a 100-meter elevation, rendering it unreachable for an air anchor novice or even an intermediate practitioner within time. The student's poor performance confirmed the teacher's belief that his challenge was insurmountable. At that moment, a blade was observed ascending. Soundgen found it captivating as the sword prodigy utilized his personal levitating sword for flight. Although the teacher wished the gifted individual would employ the anchor, he considered the possibility that the test could still be cleared. Suddenly, an expression of awe drew his gaze, causing him to feel similarly impressed. The sight perplexed the teacher, because the hero ascended effortlessly to the summit with the air anchor. Soundgen found it puzzling that the youth appeared unfazed by the elevation. However, precisely when things proceeded without issue, the hero's air boots abruptly failed. In an instant, the student started descending, much to his teacher's dismay. Yet Changhyun, however, smiled, having employed his air anchor, quickly seizing the rope, then drawing himself upward to regain balance. Once his descent ceased, the hero resumed his upward climb, his destination, 100 meters. The main character seized the anchor, which left the instructor completely bewildered, as no one should be able to pass this test using gadgets he had never used before. Shortly after, Soundgen decided to resume his explanation, stating that as close-range fighters, they could either be initiators who start battles and immobilize opponents. These fighters possess abilities for group combat and crowd management. The hero found this academic instruction tedious, especially following the practical training. Soundgen clarified that another role involved close-quarters combatants who joined the fray following the initiators. The hero, enjoying his freedom, the instructor persisted with his lecture, while the young student pondered his lack of control over the man, given his victory in their wager. The protagonist effortlessly cleared this challenge due to his vast experience within the hunting domain. However, his primary worry stemmed from a message unexpectedly found in his pocket. The unknown individual, whose motives were unclear, requested a meeting with the hero in the training center's backyard precisely at 7 o'clock. Consequently, Changhyun resolved to investigate. Upon reaching the designated location, Changhyun observed no one present, leading him to quickly conclude it was merely a prank. At that moment, the hero perceived an anomaly, since his all-seeing eye detected an unusual presence. As he started investigating, the entryway abruptly swung open, revealing a concealed stairway. The main character then entered the concealed space when something abruptly drew his notice, as a figure appeared before him, who was the Hunter Association's chairman, Jim Tech Lee. The chairman smiled, noting the young man's acceptance of his invitation. Changhyun promptly questioned the chairman about the note's vague instructions, then presumed it was an intelligence test, and inquired why the chairman was present. The elder stated he had observed the protagonist since Hunters, the next generation began, even though only one episode was then accessible. However, the chairman perceived greater potential in the renowned player, having watched him train and demonstrate his agility and keen perception. The chairman found the prodigy captivating, asserting his attempt to forecast the competition's victor, which made Changhyun instantly understand he was being identified as the ultimate champion. The chairman stated their hero would surely join the finest Lee and even exceed it. The hero remembered the note's promise of an intriguing view, which the chairman verified. Suddenly, a hidden chamber opened, showing S-rank weapons and also gear for mans. Changhyun felt bewildered. No clear reason explained why these items were shown to him. The elder questioned the youth about his desire for them, and he certainly did, as a displayed weapon had been wielded by him in his initial life, Caliburn, a greatsword. The hero had been authorized to use it following a victory. The weapon felt remarkable in his grip. Its sensation improved even more once it transformed into a firearm. Gentek Lee informed the young man he could either borrow the weapons or acquire them, so the elder stated each of these armaments surpassed anything Mora's workshop could ever create. Changhyun stated that ultimately, they were simply instruments. He then requested the chairman get directly to the point. This piqued the elder's interest, given that most individuals typically attempted to flatter him once his status became clear. Yet the youth before him sought to proceed directly with the matter at hand. Such an instance seldom happened. Consequently, the chairman extended an invitation for the prodigy to become part of the Hunter Association, guaranteeing access to any weapon within the room. The main character inquired about potential advantages for himself. This prompted the chairman to question if he understood the provisions the Hunter Association provided its affiliates, which the protagonist affirmed, explaining he found no utility in them. He then rejected the proposal and moved towards the exit as the event was set to commence, astonishing the veteran hunter. The chairman asserted that the protagonist displayed excessive self-assurance, noting his experience with numerous gifted people who had been unable to reach the first division. However, the hero declared he had no interest in such details, as his sole concern was his own well-being, and thus he offered the hero then bid the elder goodbye, expressing gratitude for the S-class weapons demonstration. Following this exchange, the hero ascended toward the surface level, leaving the chairman in solitude, perplexed by recent events. Soon afterward, the classroom door swung open. Doge and Kim hurried to find their friend, explaining their concern about potential lateness. Changyun asserted his reliability, prompting his friend to mention how he consistently caused anxiety, such as his wager with a teacher. The main character clarified that lateness would not result in a ban, given that it would significantly upset the viewers. The blonde individual inquired about the hero's whereabouts, to which he replied that he had been conversing with an elder, assuming Changyun might have accepted the proposition. Nevertheless, he felt assured of triumphing independently, thanks to the wisdom gathered from his previous existence. Changyun also anticipated getting a custom-crafted weapon from Mora's workshop once he secured victory. Thus, he resolved to elevate his standing prior to initiating his plan. The renowned gamer cheerfully considered simply assembling his own squad should he encounter setbacks. The judges soon expressed their hope that the instruction had proven beneficial, since the 3x3 fights in the urban zone were imminent. Furthermore, details were provided on how the victorious team would advance, whereas defeated participants would be eliminated from the program. Arajo keenly anticipated discovering the winners. The judges subsequently clarified that the Manaflow Stone would be awarded to the victor for the subsequent stage, aiming to heighten engagement. This news brought immense satisfaction to our protagonist, given that the Manaflow Stone improves mana quality, a crucial element for his utilization of the ether and forthcoming abilities. Consequently, the hero's resolve to triumph in the second stage intensified beyond previous levels. Minsuk Lee clarified that the battles would air live on television, serving as genuine qualifiers, then mentioned their ongoing live broadcast. Arajo subsequently stated that participants achieving the top scores within their respective classes would gain the opportunity to select their team members initially. The judges instructed competitors to proceed to the waiting area and pick their allies, given the imminent start of the contest. At that point, the broadcast concluded. Once freed from the camera's scrutiny, Arajo started reflecting on the protagonist's exceptional display throughout the initial stage, noting his sole exhibition of conceit and his indifference towards others, notwithstanding his considerable abilities. A team fight was therefore considered by her as his greatest challenge. Minsuk Lee soon understood his friend's thoughts centered on the protagonist, which left her colleague astonished by her transparency. Minsuk Lee noted that the 20 participants still present lacked preparation for group engagements, particularly in aerial combat, and mentioned her typical focus on individual abilities. Subsequently, the woman disclosed her desire for the hero's removal from the contest, explaining that despite his aerial gear prowess, a lone individual would inevitably fall victim if isolated. Arajo subsequently highlighted the hero's impending difficulties, attributing them to his limited statistics and an expansive map demanding swift long-distance travel from hunters. Her colleague then remarked on her apparent fixation, prompting her to disclose her genuine conviction in his capabilities. Nevertheless, for his own benefit, experiencing failure was deemed optimal. The third judge concurred with the initial assessment, asserting that an overconfident novice hunter faced inevitable downfall, given that even the most skilled competitor might forfeit everything through a single oversight. Consequently, the second individual chose to voice his opinion, declaring that Dooning pride and a victor's prominent self-assurance within a fiercely competitive environment like the Hunter Leagues were identical. Minsuk Lee expressed his anticipation for the prodigy's showing during the team competition his associates had arranged. Concurrently, within the waiting area, the main character was surprised upon realizing he held the initial selection. A staff individual verified this, explaining his top score was the reason. Upon hearing this, the hero offered a grin. Unexpectedly, the acquisitive combatant was taken aback, since he had been selected for the hero's squad. He believed the protagonist was ridiculing him by choosing him as an ally, indicating his awareness of the other's arrogance, as the protagonist still hadn't conceded his prior defeat. Conversely, the acquisitive combatant offered no complaints, understanding the legendary player's abilities. Ultimately, the hero could easily manage him given his youth, before stating his desire to secure victory in this match. Changyeon subsequently conveyed, with a captivating tone, his urgent requirement for their assistance. The initial bully became silent, while the remaining ones felt nauseous. Our protagonist experienced self-disgust, observing the extreme actions required for his victory. The telepath inquired about his plan, and he affirmed its existence, explaining it was his sole motivation for teaming up with them, then added they must follow his orders. Changyeon chose to inform the bullies of their impending consequences should they oppose him. They opted to convey it quietly, preventing their penalty from becoming public knowledge. After learning of their impending retribution, the acquisitive wielder found himself completely stunned and became terrified, sinking into a panicked state. This irritated the protagonist immensely, as he could not disclose that he was, in essence, re-experiencing his adolescence, so he addressed his subordinates, instructing them to flawlessly carry out his directives. Changyeon declared with a threatening voice that any errors they made would solely aid their adversaries and disadvantage him, causing both his companions to become frightened. Soon, the second phase commenced, during which participants would face elimination if discovered injured or touching the terrain. The losing side would be eliminated. Changyeon then underwent teleportation into the airborne arena and felt keen to start the conflict. The protagonist swiftly noted his central position and that he stood solitary on the skyscraper. He then opted to question his allies regarding their positions. They promptly revealed it. This led the hero to instantly move forward with his strategy. Changyeon assigned them the goal of reaching the core regardless, while avoiding all combat. The hero subsequently drew his weapon, considering the minimal player engagement expected given the arena's immense size relative to participant count. Consequently, the protagonist had to personally draw out adversaries, just as a second shot suddenly discharged, which the hero promptly avoided. His teammate then asked if he was in danger, but he confirmed everything was fine. The main character understood clearly that the attempting ambusher, an archer, operated solo, making him insignificant once defeated, prior to considering how to ascend to the map's central peak. Soon, once the hero attained the highest elevation, his allies likewise secured their hidden spots, and Changyeon inquired if they had visual contact from their locations. They confirmed this, adding that he remained unseen by them. Following this exchange, the protagonist chose to initiate his grand strategy, consequently pointing his firearm towards the heavens, then discharging several noisy rounds skyward. After this, the hero merely needed to maintain patience. At that moment, the initial opponent appeared, cordially inquiring about his purpose for being there. The hero promptly identified the man as the sword prodigy's associate. Han expressed his eagerness for a solo fight against the hero, intending to tell his teammate later, but Han Yul confirmed he had heard it all via his open earpiece, then told him to handle the gunner if he felt capable. The sword prodigy instructed him to remain cautious until his arrival. The hero, having overheard the full exchange, understood he needed speed, or he would confront a whole team solo. Han questioned why the young man was by himself, then declared that despite the hero's top rank in melee class, he was confident he would defeat him in direct combat, which left the hero astonished because the opponent spoke more than he fought. The hero suggested his teammates might be nearby, but Han swiftly dismissed this notion, reasoning that an attack would have already occurred if so. Following this exchange, the swordsman lunged at the marksman, declaring he would question him about his rivalry battle once the round concluded. Changyeon, having just managed to parry the blade, understood he had misjudged his adversary's power, prompting him to retreat several paces prior to forming a mana rope in order to escape the area, but Han utilized the mana bit to pursue him across the sky. His opponent's swiftness left the protagonist astonished. Han continued speaking, which surprised our hero because his chatter persisted even during the aerial chase. Suddenly, the hero tugged the rope, altering his mid-air trajectory, which left his adversary surprised since he had moved to his rear. Changyeon attempted to fire at the swordsman, but he effortlessly deflected the projectiles. Realizing this effort had failed, the protagonist chose to continue his flight. However, the weapon's ineffectiveness caused no shock, given Han's status as a highly skilled contestant, particularly since his artifact replica lacked the power of the original from the first stage. Changhyun's limited mana supply also posed a disadvantage. At that moment, the protagonist observed they no longer had privacy. Han-gil, encountered by the hero, declared his certain victory over him. Following this exchange, the protagonist chose to contact his allies. Jisoo remained concealed, and Jinsung likewise. The main character instructed his companions to get ready, which surprised his adversary. Immediately, the hero signaled him to proceed, causing his adversaries to halt their actions. Observing no immediate effect, the Academy participants believed the protagonist was deceiving them. Consequently, the prodigy initiated an assault, which the hero swiftly avoided, recognizing it as the opponent's unique ability. Next, the gravity wielders' turn to perform arrived, and Han-gil believed it was merely a trick, but then an unusual event occurred. At that moment, the young man understood. Someone launched a gravitational strike. Suddenly, the hero's aerial support vanished, causing him to plummet much to his opponent's surprise. However, he remained calm, maintaining a self-assured grin. His adversaries then presumed he intended for all three to perish from the height. At that instant, the Academy students' airbags abruptly ceased working, causing them to descend alongside the hero. Immediately, telekinesis became active, enveloping the hero within a mana web. The two, Han and Han-gil, remained confused, continuing their descent. He, the prodigy, then understood the deception. Consequently, Team A's two members were now out of the contest. Next, an air hook shot upwards. Jisoo inquired if his grabby caused issues, but the hero confirmed its suitability, also commending his other ally. Jinsung stated their strategy was adequate, having not anticipated his ability could form a net. The hero then asserted their tactic was perfect, given that defeating the Academy students in direct combat was unfeasible. Their plan involved deploying their hero as a decoy to draw the target into an aerial zone, prior to the telepath halting his fall with abilities, rendering other targets defenseless. Changhyun urged them to remain focused since the match continued, because he believed opponents might have understood their strategy, potentially causing issues. At that moment, system notifications informed the hero that Team A's final member had eliminated all of Team B, including herself. Consequently, the victors became evident. The initial one was the telepath, the next was the grabby wielder, and the final victor was Team C's leader, who was none other than the... Inside the waiting room, Han and Han-gil received a reprimand for their defeat by one individual, given that their accuser had single-handedly battled a whole squad. Hyuji was perplexed by their subpar showing. Then Han started rambling regarding the statistical disparity and their defeat, which astonished the hero by his extensive verbal output. A sword prodigy offered an apology, explaining he ought to have performed superiorly after understanding the foe's capabilities, prompting the hero to address his disposition, since he consistently took responsibility for unforeseen outcomes, leading the hero to consider the young man excessively undervalued his own potential. However, at that moment, his teammates came up to the hero, expressing genuine regret for their previous misconduct. The hero found himself quite surprised. Jinsung, feeling embarrassed, then chose to depart. This brought satisfaction to the hero, who had discovered an unexpected gentle aspect of the bully. Meanwhile, Artejeo found the hero's effortless win perplexing. The two other judges started discussing his talent, as he had defeated a formidable team using pure strategy, and since the assessment wasn't intended to gauge planning skills, the female judge was equally astonished. Artejeo then understood that devising such an excellent plan must have been challenging, considering his awareness of his allies' powers and their strong dislike for him, but she concluded that the hero's leadership was indeed a primary factor. The announcer declared round 1 concluded, stating Team C had gained 5 points for their excellent showing, then requested their presence on stage, confirming that every member would receive a mana flow stone exactly as pledged. This left the hero feeling relieved, since this item could enable him to enhance his full bloom skill. The announcer detailed the stone's mana-boosting effects, urging participants to leverage them for global and national supremacy. He then announced that qualifier losers faced a knockout round, with judges eliminating contestants based on their showing. This unexpected development startled the hero, given the event's nature as a show. Reviewing the eliminated participants, he was stunned to find his friend listed. The host then clarified that this area game mode required contestants to form pairs. Teams aimed to hold the specified zone for 60 seconds. However, this was not the sole path to victory. A team could also secure it by eliminating sufficient opponents. The team slaying the most contestants by match end would automatically qualify. He further explained that losers could select partners from the winners, who faced no risk to balance participant numbers. The knockout round was scheduled for the following day. Meanwhile, inside the waiting room, the hero's suspicions were confirmed. The two strongest hunters had formed an alliance to ensure their win, while his companions struggled to locate a fitting teammate. Changhyun's assessment was that Dojin Kim, despite his talent, lacked sufficient experience for triumph within the knockout round. At that moment, the blonde person noticed the protagonist, then hurried over, causing bewilderment. Dojin Kim started pleading with his schoolmate to become his partner, only to receive an immediate refusal. The blonde individual then fervently implored him, stating that after imparting rapier skills, he had essentially acted as his instructor. Therefore, he ought not to be deserted. The protagonist, bewildered by such reasoning, could not disregard Dojin Kim's earnest expression, and thus ultimately agreed to assist, realizing he had nothing to forfeit, which made the other ecstatic. The protagonist additionally sought a chance to evaluate his latest prize. He then specified that his associate must obey him, and that this would mark the final instance of his help. Consequently, a joyful swordsman and a frustrated gunner united as a team for the knockout round. Later, during that same evening, Changhyun had at last prepared to utilize the Man of Flowstone. This artifact provided two distinct uses. It could be slowly assimilated to enhance internal mana reserves, or it could be instantly used to elevate a skill's rank. Changhyun felt satisfied that the artifact performed precisely as he recalled from his past existence. Following this, he opted to consume it, placing it within his mouth, then swallowed. Instantly, All-Seeing Eye experienced a significant enhancement, alongside Arcane Transmutation and Full Bloom, both now at rank D+, which would enhance their advantages. The pair of talents Changhyun had gained from his Full Bloom accomplishment also saw an upgrade. Changhyun observed with satisfaction that his statistics had risen and core abilities had progressed. He also found reassurance in learning that his innate talents had similarly been elevated. He hypothesized that his replicated artifact could now equal the authentic version. Given these developments, the content hero opted for sleep, as a significant day awaited him the next morning. Changhyun understood completely that the following day would prove quite eventful. An ovation resounded while the curtain ascended. The protagonist started his path after joining a nearly ruined team, distinguishing himself among its post-awakeners. At that moment, Coach Yoo Jung Kim proposed that the hero become a star by joining his squad. This required him to activate his Full Bloom, enabling the necessary level for league play. Initially, the protagonist felt uncertain, preferring to allow it to develop more. The coach chose to convince the hero, allowing him to join the squad but preventing participation in any game that would boost his Full Bloom, until he could no longer resist and agreed to awaken his Full Bloom. This decision delighted the coach. Consequently, after his Full Bloom was activated, the hero started a remarkable winning streak, gaining widespread recognition. However, because his skill was activated prematurely, the protagonist abruptly lost his advantage. At that moment, Changhyun awoke and struggled to regain his breath, having just witnessed this incredible nightmare. It was an experience the hero desperately sought to repress. The present circumstances differed from his initial existence. His Full Bloom remained inactive, yet he possessed all necessary elements for a favorable beginning. Changhyun understood his journey was extensive, given he could only overcome his generation's most formidable rookies at that point. The main character wished for his Full Bloom to ascend in power prior to its activation. To attain a pinnacle he had not previously experienced, Changhyun felt relief that his past had concluded. That same day, within the waiting area, an individual questioned the blonde's readiness. Dojin Kim assured Changhyun that both he and his game's tactical approach were fully prepared. After hearing this, the main character presumed his friend possessed a particular strategy, only for the friend to disclose his entire plan involved simply obeying his instructions. The hero became perplexed, realizing he had overvalued this companion who lacked significant intelligence. Subsequently, with spectators present, a knockout stage was set to pick the remaining eligible competitors. The event was poised to commence. The contest then commenced. Promptly, the protagonist initiated his teleportation. The designated dungeon featured an urban setting, displayed as a map, where the central district featured a towering skyscraper, recognized as the tallest structure. The protagonist and his ally materialized on the map, soon discerning it was the standard urban layout. Dojin Kim inquired if the protagonist had a particular strategy. He stated their objective involved not earning kill points, but instead securing this safe area swiftly to ensure their triumph. The blonde one was surprised by this strategy, since it appeared nearly unachievable with all adversaries, notably the team of Hangyul and Haijuyu opposing them. The hero declared his friend might quit if he disliked his approach, but the blonde one simply recommended re-examining the strategy. Changhyun stated time was short. The cooldown neared its conclusion, requiring their swift movement toward the secure zone. He then mentioned their urgency, with only 10 seconds remaining. Consequently, the air anchor launched, enabling the hero's rapid traversal across the city, even as his teammates found it hard to follow. He started considering his own expertise in selecting aerial gadgets. Changyun chose a position close to the secure zone, aiming to prevent opponents from accessing it. Concurrently, elsewhere in the urban area, Haijuyu started contemplating the hero, whose strategies compelled her to face a whole team solo. She attributed her participation in the knockout round to him, and upon inquiry about her thoughts, she disclosed her distress over her teammates' effortless defeat by the protagonist, which instilled a feeling of culpability in the sword prodigy. Noticing this, the girl urged him to compose himself, stating she would not accept any further failures. Hangjul communicated the need to regard Changhyun with gravity. The woman then clarified she required no such counsel, possessing her own tactical approach. In the second stage, Haeju could have single-handedly defeated Team B had she not concealed her actual power, but now she intended to combat with her full might, since defeat was no longer permissible. The young woman proposed they would attempt a close-quarters assault on the male, given his expertise lay in mid-range combat, and even though he disapproved of this strategy, Hanjiel chose to accept and implement it. Having settled this, the brilliant squad advanced toward the combat zone. Concurrently, the protagonist inquired of his companion if her arrival was complete, and she replied by noting his incredible swiftness. Changhyun reported discovering an excellent concealed position, which he intended to utilize for containing adversaries until their joint entry into the designated zone. Daeojun Kim voiced renewed skepticism, believing this action would expose them to rival teams. However, the hero confirmed his strategic plan upon identifying two foes, then requested his frosty ally to maintain discretion and approach him on foot rather than traversing the air. The protagonist then readied his weapon and fired. Instantly, the projectile was discharged, striking the huntress, landing directly on her head, much to her companion's dismay. Thus, the initial competitor exited the knockout round. The protagonist, having targeted a crucial area, understood his offensive capability matched the first round's. He started comparing it to Ethan's skills, yet soon recognized its superiority, even exceeding his former peak potential. As the remaining Team F member attempted to flee, the protagonist detected him using his keen observational ability, then aimed his handgun and eliminated him with one shot. Daeojun Kim, drawn by the commotion, commented that other teams had started battling, prompting the hero to disclose that the sounds were his own gunfire, then issued precise instructions to his teammates regarding his position. The marksman prepared to secure kill points. Meanwhile, the female judge grew frustrated as the scene before her seemed unbelievable. Min Seok Lee reiterated his earlier statement, confirming the young man's firearm proficiency, and Joe's as well. It was theorized that this capability was not innate to him, a logical conclusion for the others, as they had observed Changhyun using guns during the first audition. Otherwise, he would not have sought ether during the initial trial. The lady highlighted the firearm's significant superiority compared to the spotting period, when the hero had only used his weapon to disrupt the enemy's rhythm. Suddenly, a man the judges recognized as the chairman stated the prodigy must have fulfilled all conditions to obtain this new power. The astonished lady questioned their superior about his reason for being there. The judges sought to demonstrate respect, but their elder stated it was unwarranted for an aged hunter like him, then explained his sole purpose for being there was to observe a particular contestant alongside them. The relieved Min Seok Lee inquired if the elder also intended to enlist the protagonist into his ranks. Unexpectedly, the man refused, explaining the gunner had previously rejected him. The chairman felt regret for failing to present a more appealing proposal. Nevertheless, he chose to disregard it and concentrate solely on the next occurrences. Subsequently, the chairman insisted on joining the program, which left the three arbiters quite surprised. Their responses entertained the elder, who confirmed his seriousness. Given this, Min Seok Lee was compelled to consent to attempt securing the chairman's entry into the competition. This also heightened his doubts, since he started questioning the real intentions of the initial generation hunter. Meanwhile, Upon Dojin Kim's arrival at the structure, his companion promptly directed him toward his quarters. Thus, the youth proceeded into the tall building. The teammate's physical form was concealed there. Consequently, their reunion occurred. The hero's predictions were unfolding precisely, as no one had yet attempted to seize the tower, while his companion believed others were hiding, too fearful of being discovered by rivals during the challenge. Dojin Kim requested the protagonist reveal his strategy, but the gunner stated their concern should be limited to one team. Then he faced his ally, inquiring if he preferred confronting the sword prodigy or the hammer genius. Following a moment to absorb the information, Dojin Kim became appalled, thinking his companion intended for him to defeat the geniuses, but Changyun explained his sole desire was for distraction, prompting Dojin Kim to ask what Changyun's role would be during that period. The hero stated his intention to seize the capture zone. Dojin Kim found the plan's straightforwardness astonishing, leading him to anticipate a dire outcome. Meanwhile, his companion urged them to proceed. The fair-haired person inquired if the prodigy had fully considered the situation. Our protagonist's answer was simply a smile. After some time had passed walking, the blade wielder still couldn't comprehend the ridiculous strategy he participated in. Thus, the protagonist proceeded into the tower. Once the entrance was revealed, they were confronted by their target. Once they drew near, the system notified every participant that the protagonists had secured the capture zone. Also, should any player violate its boundaries, or if a protagonist leaves, the countdown would be reset. The system then announced a reset. It specified the countdown duration as 60 seconds. This news brought a broad smile to the hero's face, since he now had a chance for some enjoyment. Observing the prodigy and his companions taking over the tower, KJU felt confused. She had expected the gunner to eliminate targets remotely, not pursue the primary objective. The sword prodigy theorized the protagonist discovered another artifact, but his allies argued against this possibility, explaining this arena was merely a city, not a mystic replica, so no concealed treasures existed. KJU sought Hangyal's perspective, given his prior encounter regarding the situation, as their foe appeared to be luring everyone. The young man clarified that only an artifact enabled the hero to defeat him in the initial stage, even with his own rapid thought and high speed. The sword wielder stated that without the hero's agility, he would not have been defeated in the second stage by falling into the trap. However, within the capture zone, the protagonist's movement would face some limitations. KJU then started to theorize that the young man's intention wasn't to complete the primary objective, but rather to attract everyone to his spot before vanishing unexpectedly. At that moment, understanding dawned on her. The woman asserted she had foreseen her opponent's strategy. Chang Hyun, possessing weak stats and restricted movement within the capture zone, possessed merely a single option, allowing the attracted competitors to battle each other. As he remained hidden securely, the expert swordsman inquired of the skilled hammer wielder regarding her strategy, and she detailed their need to create sufficient disruption to force him into the open, given his initial disinterest in securing the zone. The woman felt confident her strategy would secure their victory. Then, without warning, participants were eliminated. Team C, along with a participant from Team A, met their demise. Witnessing this, KJU found herself perplexed, considering the premature timing of any eliminations. This prompted her to understand that the countdown ought to have been reinitialized within the capture zone, which had transformed into a combat area because of the escaping hero's disruption. A friend then directed her gaze. Merely 20 seconds were left until the knockout round's conclusion, much to the young person's surprise. Consequently, the hammer genius understood nothing of our hero's scheme. Sometime before, the gunner had patiently waited. Even though his friend questioned his strategy of battling every other contestant, Dojin Kim recognized his role as a backup for those who evaded the projectile from his mentor. The young man genuinely questioned the plan's effectiveness. At that moment, a hunter violently forced the door open, insisting on a fair battle, only to be taken by surprise and swiftly shot in the head. In that manner, a Team A member fell, astonishing our hero's companion. At that instant, our heroes were alarmed by an individual cutting himself at the entrance as a spearman appeared from within the wall. Changyun attempted to fire at him, however, the spearman avoided the projectiles, concealing himself behind a massive boulder. This made the hero understand his weapons couldn't penetrate barriers. When he observed his adversaries preparing for combat, the hero felt no concern since a swordsman accompanied him. Immediately, Dojin Kim engaged in swordplay against a different participant. The hero subsequently observed the spearman's ally attempting to approach stealthily from behind him, prompting him to utilize his perception ability to precisely pinpoint his adversaries, then simultaneously firing upon them. With that, Team C was eliminated. The hero chose to verify the current hour. Upon checking, he noted half of the allotted minute had elapsed. Such a short duration could enable the swordsman and gunner to secure victory by meeting the primary objective. However, the hero's aim was total annihilation. Soon afterward, the pair of geniuses reached the tower. At that instant, the girl sensed danger, spotting two unknown individuals ahead of them, which prompted her to warn her comrade to ready his weapons and prepare for battle. Having identified one of the people before them as the hero, who then directed his firearms toward them. A projectile from the hero struck the adjacent pillar, causing the protagonist to fire once more, only to suddenly realize he was within striking distance of the hammered genius and the sword prodigy. However, at that moment, the pillar started to crack, which ultimately surprised the young man. The hero's strategy was unfolding as intended, with the structure starting to crumble because of the damaged support. Witnessing the capture zone's destruction, the brilliant individual considered their subsequent move. Consequently, under 20 seconds remained before the knockout phase concluded. Given the time constraint, Haiju Yu and Hang Yul resolved to push towards the objective. At that moment, distinct gunshots and subsequent screams became audible, causing the young woman to be alarmed. Noticing the elimination of 3 contestants, she urgently considered how to neutralize a weapon firing from an undisclosed position. The handgun was re-aimed and discharged, resulting in another hunter's death, preventing the girl from finding their hero. With the structure in ruins, thick dust enveloped her. The hero regained composure. The hero considered his inability to confront such numerous adversaries directly. Consequently, he activated his all-seeing skill, enabling him to locate and eliminate a rival contestant. The hero found this scenario familiar, reminiscent of his past existence. His team faced a difficult predicament. They urgently required a rescuer to prevent finishing 9th place, despite widespread skepticism. This is where the concept originated. At that time, LTD had only 1 player remaining, opposing the fully operational RTX team. Changhyun's resolve to secure victory and avoid 9th place was unwavering, prompting him to target the pillar with his rifle and bring it down, mirroring his recent action in his present existence. The commentator speculated that the hero, having lost all hope, intended to eliminate everyone in a self-sacrificial assault. However, the young man's resolve to win was stronger than ever. Everyone was astonished. Despite the crumbling building and severely limited visibility, the hero successfully landed every shot. Changhyun continued discharging numerous rounds from his weapon. Rapidly, 3 RTX operatives were eliminated. Everyone watched in awe. The protagonist had already defeated 6 opponents with only 1 remaining, suggesting a legendary comeback was imminent. However, as the protagonist pulled the firing mechanism, he now faced a blade overhead and discovered his mana reserves were depleted. Consequently, Changhyun fell to RTX, fulfilling all predictions, which secured RTX the top scoreboard position and relegated LTD to rank 9. Soon afterward, within the locker room, the protagonist experienced a void, having been on the verge of triumph. That single event initiated the renowned player's decline. Yet in this current existence, the protagonist held the hammer genius under threat. The young woman frantically attempted to escape, but her efforts proved futile. Instantly, the protagonist, now free from significant obstacles, succeeded in defeating the genius squad. Concurrently, the panel of judges expressed astonishment since the gunner eliminated every rival competitor, and during a contest requiring combat within the secure zone, the hero secured triumph through simultaneous fulfillment of both unique victory requirements. Consequently, RNGO was compelled to acknowledge the hero's professional-level abilities. Min-Sik Lee expressed considerable satisfaction, having been correct about the youth's potential. He then recalled his initial recognition of the young one's talent, highlighting the exceptional firearm proficiency demonstrated by the impressive display. His associate acknowledged the youth's capability, but remained puzzled by his ability to strike every target unseen, prompting Min-Sik Lee to inquire if any inherent skill might have prompted his early pistol usage, then asserting that precision represented a crucial element the hero needed to develop as an ability. The judge believed the young prodigy possessed ample confidence in his aiming ability. Subsequently, with the surviving hunters assembled within the stadium, the hero started reviewing the positive feedback posted across social media platforms. The young man observed the positive comments and remarked that he too would have found the battle enjoyable as an observer. However, the hero's actual experience differed, as he had struggled, having secured victory solely through surprise attacks, employing a tactic he had already perfected. At that moment, the full bloom rank advanced from D to C, following the hero's double victory in the knockout round. The hero, feeling satisfied, acquired the talent Legendary Smegbert, which significantly boosted his long-range accuracy, alongside Guided Shot, which altered the trajectory of his assaults. Dojin Kim confronted the hero, accusing him of concealing his genuine abilities, then commended his recent display and requested to test his firearm. The blonde individual remarked that he ought to have informed him of his ample mana reserves, sufficient to eliminate all opponents, prior to inquiring about his precision. The hero asserted he merely acted on instinct, a response that failed to appease the swordsman. Dojin Kim criticized the genius, suggesting his temperament led him to keep such information from his sole companion. This revelation made the hero aware that, since his reincarnation, he had conversed solely with the swordsman, highlighting his profound solitude. At that moment, the three judges materialized on the platform. Arajo clarified that becoming a hunter wasn't universally achievable, stating that the harsh truth lay in an individual's inherent potential. The final outcome was clear. The judges confirmed their program's objective, to find only those destined to become the finest hunters, thus setting high expectations. A female judge then declared that all participants still possessed an opportunity to succeed, warning against early celebration since the actual competition was just commencing, and subsequently welcomed them to the Hunters League. Min-suk Lee clarified that their program emphasized speed, noting they had already identified promising young talents expected to achieve great renown. This information instilled a feeling of pride in our hero. The third judge then outlined the final round, stating contestants would participate in a regular Hunter League match after being divided into 2 groups of 7. These teams would be randomly assigned in 7 days, with the MVP ranking first and the subsequent top hunter taking second. The judges further stated that a notable individual would be participating in the finals, a detail that sparked our hero's curiosity. On that particular day, while our hero and the remaining contestants were making their departure from the stadium, he heard an unexpected call. The caller was a recruiter for the LHR team, accompanied by another man who introduced himself as the PR team's recruiter. After this encounter, our hero started considering his need to locate a dependable team a team that suited him was needed. Changhyun then suggested a private discussion with the man. Soon afterward, once arrangements were complete, the protagonist faced 4 distinct recruiters, and stated that, given their large number, he requested everyone present to declare their terms immediately. The initial individual introduced himself as a coach from SMA Private Academy, then mentioned their ability to assist his entry into major leagues, and further disclosed the academy's capacity to send him to foreign leagues, accompanied by a private tutor through international student exchange programs. However, the coach grew annoyed when the boy stated numerous others awaited their opportunity, suggesting the coach needed to persuade him briefly. Consequently, the coach promised an annual payment of 200 million, along with a 100 million bonus. Another man then interrupted, offering a significantly larger bonus and a superior salary, which they could not precisely determine at present. The protagonist found the second proposal quite appealing, but he prioritized the liberty to select his own team, irrespective of financial incentives. The protagonist concluded he would be better off without joining any such group. A third recruiter then presented an identical offer to the second, adding that the hero's every wish would be granted upon acceptance. Following this, Changhyun inquired if he could form his own team under their banner. Neither recruiter could provide an answer, which led the hero to understand this autonomy was impossible. Consequently, the attending photography team chose to conclude the meeting after giving the hero their business cards, promising to work on his terms. He fully understood the allure of such proposals for a novice like himself. However, he then observed a single recruiter still present, despite only 3 cards resting on the table. The hero questioned the businessman about any further topics, and the man introduced himself as a recruiter for a group called Peer, suggesting they could meet his requirements. Our hero found the team's name curious, understanding it belonged to a lower-tier league since its existence was unknown to him. The recruiter stated that while signing bonuses were absent, unlike the other 3 offers, our hero would gain control to build his own squad, and upon inquiry regarding current members, he clarified that most agreements were nearing their end, with players uncertain about remaining. Consequently, the roster awaited the players' selection of new hunters to complete it. This information prompted the hero to consider that, despite the team's low standing, they offered the autonomy he sought. He noted that the proposal implied he would only select novice teammates, given the recruiter's imprecise language. The recruiter, flustered, suggested organizing an encounter between the player and the president, who strongly wished for the hero to join his squad. As the young man pondered his decision, the recruiter confirmed that his pleasure if the young man agreed to an audience with his boss, leading Changhyun to state he would consider it. Following this exchange, the hero remained solitary in the space, holding 4 business cards. He faced options. Pick one ally to join Division 3's top ranks for substantial compensation, or gather a squad of novices for the lower divisions. Ultimately, his success rested on his own output. As he left the room, a person approached him. This individual was his friend, who inquired about any favorable proposals he might have received. Dojin Kim responded by stating he had been awaiting the hero, given his continued presence at the academy. The blonde individual subsequently questioned his friend regarding the specifics of the offers presented, and his friend detailed that the majority included a substantial salary plus a 300 million won incentive, a revelation that astonished the young man. Changhyun understood his friend's academy earnings would be lower, yet it served as a training ground, whereas he himself would join the Division 3 league. Dojin Kim questioned his friend about selecting a team, and the hero replied that no choice had been finalized. The blonde individual found this puzzling, considering the considerable generosity of every proposal, yet his curiosity swiftly turned to astonishment when he discovered his friend's prerequisite, selecting his own squad members. Such a demand seemed absurd. Despite his abilities, the hero remained a novice, a fact Changhyun himself acknowledged. Changhyun started to consider that the hero was merely receiving what he had rightfully acquired. He considered whether greater recognition from recruiters would yield him better benefits. The swordsman, observing the protagonist's agreement, presumed the team drafting concept would be abandoned, but the protagonist stated this was not feasible before clarifying his need to demonstrate greater capability to recruiters for achieving his objective. Concurrently, the sword prodigy left his meeting room feeling fatigued, as recruiters continuously presented numerous proposals despite his insistence on being merely a student. Just as the young man prepared to voice his displeasure, a notification arrived, prompting him to check his phone with curiosity, revealing a message from the Hammer Genius, advising against having a formal meeting with the recruiters. Hang Jio marveled at the message's perfect timing. The young man then pondered the subsequent whereabouts of a particular person, recognizing this individual as our hero, the inaugural Korean hunter sniper. The sword prodigy continued to marvel at the protagonist's flawless shooting, even with his vision obscured. Hang Jio stated he would find it highly entertaining to encounter the hero again, either in Division 3 or a higher rank. The sword prodigy anticipated his subsequent encounter with the gunner with enthusiasm. Soon after, Dojin Kim inquired of the protagonist whether he needed any repairs, given their destination was the maintenance shop. The hero found this query intriguing, considering their participation in the hunter lead match necessitated mana gadgets, though the blonde individual believed aerial equipment would suffice. The hero criticized his companion for failing to properly observe the pro matches. Given the wide array of mana gadgets available, crafting the optimal one for a specific adversary could secure triumph. At that moment, the shopkeeper greeted both middle schoolers and inquired if they had previously used the facility. The woman questioned whether their visit was for gadget revision or weapon repair. She then proposed they examine her new gadgets, as this marked her initial visit to the shop. The group was presented with impressive goods. Dojin Kim found these quite striking. The young man appeared captivated by the merchandise. The shop owner offered assistance to the young man in selecting his mana device, an offer he took since the companion he indicated lacked knowledge regarding mana devices. The shopkeeper clarified that air bits and the air anchor were not the sole types of devices available, mentioning they came in 4 categories: offensive, defensive, and also mobility, which piqued the interest of the blonde woman, who had only mentioned 3 of the 4. The shopkeeper then clarified that the 4th was the specialized devices class, with every item being unique due to their distinct characteristics. Describing specialized devices to others might be difficult, given they were typically custom-built, each intended for a particular function. Du Jin subsequently inquired if he desired specialized devices, but our hero declined, noting their singular function contrasted with their need for versatility. The woman affirmed this, explaining that specialized devices served a specific strategy, or were for confronting a particular opponent, whereas standard items offered numerous applications. The woman presented the mana shield. This item forms a defensive layer for the person using it. The blonde character understood the defensive item's limited potential, given its infrequent use during matches, making the lady clarify its role as a final option, noting a cooldown period after each shield deployment. The hero then criticized his lack of knowledge regarding such devices, so the younger individual confirmed his unfamiliarity with them. The hero detailed this gadget's application by marksmen, who typically sustained significant damage, contrasting with close-range combatants, allowing them to ready a counter-offensive. The protagonist stated the newcomer needed to grasp which gadget suited specific roles and how to integrate them with other equipment. Subsequently, a projectile was fired. Then it finally detonated. The protagonist identified it as a mana bomber and inquired if it would benefit the young man. Jin Kim asserted these items needed combination with marksman's projectiles to enhance their attack's explosive power. The hero strongly stated that a mana bomber, being so large, could not be affixed to his bullets, a point the swordsman understood. Still, this prompted the hero to consider achieving it by utilizing the ether, capable of altering forms. The swordsman subsequently suggested the Airdaster's friend, indicating its potential assistance with his primary attribute, mobility for escaping adversaries. Changhyun acknowledged the idea's appeal while taking the object, then stealthily approaching his companion, aiming his weapon at the latter's head. The main character explained that ambushing foes with it would prevent their mana shield activation, proving more effective. Jin suggested acquiring every gadget, but the hero countered that their mana reserves were insufficient, and match rules limited the quantity. Upon inquiry regarding his ultimate choice, the protagonist declared he would select the air dash, then inquired about his friend's preference. The young man clarified he remained undecided, as none of the devices encountered thus far offered any assistance. Following a brief contemplation, the renowned gamer identified the ideal device for his companion. Thus he retrieved it, subsequently offering it to his bewildered friend. Moments later, competitors for the final round assembled within the arena. The participants received thanks for their presence, then learned the final stage was scheduled for 6 days later. Next, the final arena's location and the chosen teams were revealed. The designated final arena bore the name Battleground of the Gods, a mountain forest adorned with divine statues. Observing the arena's design, which resembled a towered dungeon, brought excitement to the hero. Given his extensive familiarity with the Battleground of the Gods, having previously engaged in combat there during his past life, the moment arrived to reveal the competing teams. Beginning with the blue one, the roster was thus displayed. Then came the red team, which included the hero and promptly appeared on screen. Arjo stated that she and the other judges anticipated strong teamwork, given that all allies had been disclosed. While the hero considered the absurdity of forming team bonds within 6 days, the judges confirmed an additional announcement. Minsup Lee clarified that the chairman would join the match, acting as an adversary to both teams. This revelation left all finalists taken aback, particularly the hero. The focus then shifted back to the chairman. The chairman expressed high expectations for the finalists, explaining his presence served as a gesture of gratitude. While the new competitors felt apprehension, the panel of judges sent them off, conveying their desire for each to demonstrate their abilities during the event. Subsequently, a person came up to the chairman while he departed the arena. The curious chairman then spun around, inquiring of the youth if he had observed anything specific from him, since the individual was the renowned gunner prodigy. The hero mentioned his intention to give back the PER business card, which puzzled the chairman, leading him to clarify that the recruiter had requested a meeting with his superior, who proved to be the chairman. PER, ranked among the lowest teams within Division 3. And although the hero typically disregarded such weak groups, the hero remembered a past life revelation. The Hunter Association chairman led the team, surprising all. The old man found this amusing, but he swiftly became serious again, which startled the hero. The old man inquired why the hero knew this secret. Considering Jung-hyun Lee officially presided over PER, the hero responded that he could perceive it. Chang-hyun thought the hero's vague answer was ideal, since it would make the old man believe he had a skill for reading minds, causing him to ponder his subsequent actions. The chairman was entertained, not having anticipated a skill capable of revealing such information. Following this, the old man chose to properly introduce himself to the hero. He identified himself as PER's president and the Hunter Association's chairman, then inquired if the hero would accept either of his proposals, leaving the hero speechless. as this was the moment he had anticipated. He stated his desire to acquire PER in return for joining. Shortly afterward, the recruiter questioned his superior about whether Changhyun presented his business card, and her confirmation followed. The man believed the hero's proposed condition was excessively demanding, considering he lacked sufficient value. The chairman started contemplating the first Korean sniper's request, which involved managing the team's operations and finances, a significant cost. While he might have distinguished himself among hunters, the new generation, ultimately every participant, himself included, remained a novice. The chairman concurred with the recruiter, mentioning the young man had presented a revised proposal, which piqued his interest. He then detailed their wager on the match, where the hero asserted his capability to overcome both the chairman and the opposing squad, a notion the astonished recruiter considered foolish. However, the elder individual, intending to restrain himself throughout, suggested the youth's value might justify his requested compensation upon success. Nevertheless, the individual clarified that all probabilities were unfavorable for him. The chairman subsequently disclosed that in his final discussion with their hero, he had declared that should he secure victory in the wager, he would be the one to recruit the chairman. While the recruiter was utterly astonished by this display of hubris, the elder individual found it undeniably captivating. The elder, harboring some uncertainty, granted the protagonist an opportunity to prove his worth. Concurrently, the main character inquired of his teammates whether they objected to his assumption of the role of leader. He anticipated the swordmaster would contend for the position, yet the prodigy instead fixed a captivated stare upon him, causing discomfort. Changhyun chose to abandon their current plan, explaining that the new approach would center on himself and Hang Yul, given their status as the team's two most skilled members. He then sketched the combat zone, clarifying that the blue team likely held similar tactical thoughts, and because their destination was the battleground of the gods, their initial strategy involved farming. Changhyun further elaborated that the chairman's involvement would compel him and certain others to pursue an alternative course of action. Thus, as the match commenced, their squad began to gather resources extensively. The protagonist, accompanied by his companion and the sword prodigy, would seek out the chairman and pinpoint his location. This revelation left the younger members utterly stunned. The protagonist then detailed his plan, which involved the elder's downfall. Jeon-sung, however, considered this absurd, since the trio stood no chance facing a chairman who was not using his full power. The telepath conceded the team captain's strong performance during the initial 2 stages, but insisted this did not establish him as the most powerful competitor on a national level, urging humility. Meanwhile, the protagonist started considering that he lacked the time to engage with an individual still holding a grudge. Hang Dial clarified that the chairman's strength was common knowledge among all present, including the captain, and that they should trust him due to his effective leadership during the program. This statement piqued the hero's interest, because his long-standing rival was unexpectedly offering support. Changyun then redirected the discussion, clarifying that a direct confrontation with the chairman was not planned. He then requested the designated team to heed his strategy, assuring them of its sound reasoning. The hero's gaze reflected an intense yearning for triumph. Subsequently, the female judge calmed the audience, then proceeded to detail the match's operational rules, after which numerous holographic figures materialized. She clarified that the Hunter-Leaser format involved 7-on-7 contests, with specific elements changing based on the combat arena. The match's initial phase involves a farming stage, where participants must gain levels through defeating monsters, followed by the mission stage, requiring both teams to eliminate neutral monsters or secure specific areas. The final segment is the team fight, where opposing teams engage in combat. The judge stated that no 2 matches were identical, as missions varied depending on the map. Min-sik Lee then explained that the chairman of the Hunter Association would participate in the battlefield. And with the young student's role fully detailed, it was time to clarify the chairman's function for everyone. It was thus revealed that the elder would join the match as a neutral monster. However, this raised concerns because Chairman Lee is among the most powerful first-generation hunters, making it challenging for them to keep pace. Araju clarified that, for this reason, the elder's stats would all be reduced by 2 points. Min-sik Lee highlighted the critical impact of even minor stat differences in professional leagues, suggesting the students now might have a chance. Araju then explained that the first-generation hunter would face 2 teams of 7 alone, which would enhance the excitement. And so Min-sik Lee explained to the audience how everyone would be looking forward to this finale, where the best first-generation hunter faces talented newbies. The broadcast concluded, ending their live segment. A colleague questioned the judge, seeking his forecast for the match victor, anticipating he would name his favored hero. However, Min-suk Lee asserted the protagonist would certainly be defeated in the final round, then inquired of his friend if she understood the chairman's decision to participate. Araju theorized the chairman intended to personally evaluate every competitor, determining who truly deserved triumph. His friend affirmed this, adding that it would undoubtedly challenge the young prodigy significantly, since his particular skills, namely swiftness and distant surprise assaults, would prove ineffective facing the chairman. Given his reputation as a formidable close-quarters combatant capable of pursuing foes, a marksman could not contend with him unless a single strike brought him down. The lady countered that the imposed power restriction should narrow their disparity, thereby offering the young man an opportunity to demonstrate his capabilities. Min-suk Lee clarified that because the system limited his power, the chairman would be exerting maximum effort, adding that any outcome remained conceivable in a Hunter League contest. The third judge expressed substantial agreement with the second. Further asserting his faith in 3 sub-first, he declared the final map, the battleground of the gods, presented 3 sub-first chances. The final countdown neared its conclusion. Upon its completion, the reality visual commenced and public comments started appearing at an astonishing speed. The majority focused on the first-generation hunter participating in a middle school match. Concurrently, the stadium audience erupted in excited cheers. Both the 3 judges and the young hunters had taken their positions. Chang-yeon experienced relief, recognizing the upcoming arena, a factor that would benefit his strategy. A judge moved to the podium's central area and clarified that for this final match at the battleground of the gods, participants must adhere to the rules, meaning the loser would be a with that. The finals commenced. Previously, mysterious tower dungeons appeared globally, sparking international tensions among hunters. This led to the Hunter League's formation. Powerful artifacts within the towers made disputes unavoidable. Combatants battled both fellow hunters and map monsters, prompting the Hunter League's establishment. Consequently, many league arenas were merely replicas of actual towers. This implied that experienced hunters, such as the chairman, possessed superior map familiarity compared to novices. The protagonist reached their destination, the arena named the Battleground of the Gods. Hangul inquired whether the protagonist intended to follow his strategy, receiving an affirmative response. Therefore, he suggested that he, along with his 2 teammates, depart. The protagonist understood that retreat was no longer feasible. Concurrently, within the stadium, officials opted to observe the participants. The blue team, with the Hammer Genius leading their vanguard, was eliminating the monsters, indicating they were accumulating strength before their encounter with the chairman. The other judge affirmed this as the optimal strategy, noting that the first-generation hunter, despite imposed limitations, still greatly surpassed the beginners in power. The judges then observed that the red team, conversely, had dispatched 4 members to farm alongside the 3, while the remaining members appeared to have a different objective. It was noticed that the swordsman, the sword prodigy, and the gunner had deviated from the expected route, which left Min-suk Lee astonished, as their trajectory seemed to be directly toward the first-generation hunter. Our hero sought his perspective, and he disclosed his idea, which she deemed impossible, given that the 3, with their current attributes, were inferior to the older man. Min-suk Lee, sharing this view, suggested they observe the remainder of the plan. Subsequently, our hero entered the neutral monster zone where the chairman awaited, armed with his halberd and shield. Just then, the man detected something unusual, as it appeared some contestants were entering his domain upon seeing the one dashing towards him. The elder found this amusing, pondering the individual's strategy, as he had believed they were attempting to approach him stealthily. The initial generation hunter then perceived his adversaries were concealed, and abruptly, a shot rang out, which the chairman effortlessly deflected with his shield. The hero continued firing, but no projectiles struck the chairman. Observing the simplicity of this, the elder requested the prodigy increase the difficulty, so the protagonist resumed firing his projectiles, while the chairman deflected them all with his shield, advancing forward. At that instant, Dojin Kim crept up behind the man and assailed him alongside the sword prodigy's blades to catch him unawares, but the elder effortlessly parried the rapier and the floating swords. Chairman Lee expressed his disappointment in the girl, having anticipated a truly unforeseen scheme rather than a dull surprise assault. However, just then, as an enigmatic breeze started to stir, the chairman became curious upon identifying an approaching entity. A massive shadow neared the elder, leaving him astonished, for he now confronted an arena statue, which had truly animated. The dungeon previously served as a battleground for a giant race that mysteriously transformed into stone figures, yet persisted in life despite their petrified state. Our hero possessed deep knowledge about this arena's mysteries, given that professional matches occurred within actual dungeons during his past existence. Consequently, he understood the proper technique for statue reanimation. Previously, the blonde individual became astonished after learning of our hero's strategy. However, the swordmaster speculated the youth might have observed something beneficial, similar to what happened during the initial stage. Changyun asserted he merely acted on instinct, which left the swordsman curious. Dojin Kim believed our hero was merely guessing, as he declared the need to precisely shatter the fractures to rouse the giants. Conversely, Hangyo enthusiastically suggested our hero was simply selecting an ability. When questioned regarding the dormant monster's alliance, the hero clarified that the giants' prolonged petrification likely caused their insanity, predicting they would become wild when freed. Dojin Kim voiced concerns the giants might not target the chairman, given his neutral monster guise, but the hero countered that if his hypothesis proved correct, the giants would certainly pursue the chairman, prompting the blonde individual to note they too would become targets. Surprisingly, the hero then revealed they possessed devices capable of handling such predicaments. Returning to the current moment, the chairman stood astonished by the creature before him. Thus, the protagonist succeeded in releasing a colossal monster to combat a different one. The statue's left shoulder developed a fissure, and 2 more appeared on its right thigh. The elder understood the hero's intention wasn't to defeat him outright. Rather, he was merely creating a diversion, since his actual strategy involved rousing the dormant giants, a fact the old man should remain unaware of until entering the dungeon. This revelation only deepened the chairman's bewilderment, as the hero's scheme appeared to hinge on information he ought not to possess. At that instant, the colossal statue lunged toward the elderly man. Its immense assaults then targeted him, but the chairman successfully deflected the blow with his shield. The elder's thoughts were less on the creature before him and more on the 3 vanished contestants who were no longer visible. He then perceived that the new recruits had deployed invisibility cloaks, a device not widely favored, given its restricted utility and short concealment period. At that very moment, the colossal figure once more aimed its axe at the chairman, who merely deflected the blow with his shield. At that instant, the hero materialized from behind the barrier and discharged a weapon at the chairman, who then perceived the youth's strategy was to deny him any respite. Nevertheless, a grin spread across his features, prior to releasing a powerful surge of energy which successfully froze the projectile in its trajectory. The veteran found amusement in the newcomer's ability to corner him. He remarked that no one had pushed him to that extent in a long time. The veteran hunter commended the youth's tactical approach. However, he declared his defeat was not yet certain. He stated their current parity and challenged the young man to reveal his full capabilities during the match. This spectacle ignited the stadium audience's fervor. Their enthusiasm surged. Minsuk Lee appeared especially stunned. Arajo clarified that the neutral monsters dodged projectiles had actually been aimed at the statues, intending their revival. Reflecting on the hero's strategy, targeting structural weaknesses while feigning pursuit of the chairman, then vanishing to isolate the elder, Minsuk Lee's admiration for the prodigy's immense talent intensified. Consequently, he observed the remainder of the contest intently, while the audience rejoiced at the thrilling spectacle. Concurrently, the main character understood that the initial generation hunter's resilience. The main character then resolved to intensify his efforts for a win. Consequently, while the chairman managed the reanimated giant, the hero left his hiding spot and discharged his firearm. However, his shot was directed toward a dormant statue, but the chairman, demonstrating incredible speed, managed to block it with his shield just in time. Thus, the elder successfully prevented another opponent from joining the fray, and subsequently, after touching down on the statue's summit, before making another leap to dodge the creature's axe, he conveyed to the hero, with clear disappointment, that the stratagem was already known to him. Observing this development, Changyun found himself forced to employ his all-seeing eye, and started carefully tracking the elder's motions. After dedicating a moment to inspect the shield, the protagonist opted for a fresh tactic, discharging his weapon yet again. The first-generation hunter again deflected the shot with his shield, declaring the tactic ineffective. Despite this, the mana bullet continued its trajectory. At that moment, a second bullet struck the initial one. The chairman grew wary, observing how the bullets scattered in various directions after their collision. This maneuver enabled the hero to shatter an additional statue. Consequently, 2 sleeping giants became active. The first-generation hunter faced a difficult predicament. Changhyun understood that even the chairman's strength would falter here, prompting him to reach out to his 2 teammates, informing them the rest of the team would soon appear, then inquiring if their instructions were recalled, a fact they both affirmed. Elsewhere, a short distance away, the remaining team members eliminated a wolf pack. Junsun, feeling relief from the monster's demise, questioned the team leader's objectives. Junsun offered assistance, as the leader had declared him the most reliable among their group of 4. The leader's initial instruction was for them to gather resources without any casualties, then to draw out the blue team, and finally to retreat instantly if they encountered foes. The telepath found the escape strategy particularly noteworthy. At that moment, the young man became aware that the blue team had appeared, actively seeking them, precisely as the hero had anticipated. Heiju Yu was resolved to secure victory in this final match. Subsequently, the telepath instructed the remaining members to flee with maximum speed. However, during their retreat, the red team members became visible to the blue team. The hammered genius prompted her companions to pursue the adversary. Junsun started remembering their assignment, to provoke the opposing team into pursuit, following their hero's directive. However, as the victory-obsessed hammered genius pursued him, he started questioning the strategy. The young man then faced his companion, instructing him to maintain a direct path while 2 projectiles whizzed past. Heiju Yu continued her sprint until an observation caused her to halt. A different giant's effigy sustained impacts to its head and shoulder. As the creature stirred to life, the girl comprehended her entry into the neutral monster's territory. The sculpture's broken pieces began descending to the ground. A powerful roar erupted from the now active giant. She tried her utmost to timely avoid the approaching strike. This situation piqued the telepath's interest, given that the protagonist's task was to confront the chairman, a fact that further perplexed him, especially as the elder battled 2 giants unaided. The protagonist requested his companion extend the disruption, but the friend stated he could not provide much time. Consequently, Changhyun insisted on 3 minutes. Junsun inquired about his strategy, but received no clear response. The renowned player instructed the swordmaster and the fair-haired companion to move swiftly while their invisibility persisted and eliminate the red team upon his command. He then initiated a countdown, with every ally poised for action. The moment his cue arrived, his 2 companions shed their cloaks of invisibility and rushed forward, focusing on the hammer genius and her remaining squad. Heiju Yu swiftly grasped her precarious predicament, instructing her team to concentrate on the primary adversary within this chaotic battle while evading both the rocks and the animated statues. At that instant, an ability was deployed. The healing genius cast a restorative spell, Sanctuary, upon her allies. This action annoyed the hero, prompting a swift response, causing him to fire a projectile and direct it toward the girl, only for it to be suddenly obstructed by a device. Heiju Yu stated her preparations were complete for battling the protagonist. The hero then understood her capabilities were beyond his current methods. Consequently, he needed to activate his contingency strategy, so the protagonist retrieved a component from the 8 parts forming the mana bomber and molded it into a projectile, then infused it with his crafted artifact. This novel ammunition possessed greater density than standard rounds, prompting the hero to aim his weapon and fire at the girl, unleashing what appeared to be a potent energy discharge. Its immense force shattered the sanctuary skill's barrier and nearly ejected the girl from the magic circle. Witnessing this, his allies expressed astonishment, since such an event was unprecedented. Even the hero was astonished by his achievement in producing a mana bomber bullet. The hammer genius sustained an injury. Though her healing ability closed wounds quickly, she experienced significant irritation, as she abruptly dodged a levitating sword strike, simultaneously considering the need to defeat the remaining red team members. Following this, the girl got ready. In the Hunter League, power acquisition presented only 2 options. The first involved farming spawned monsters, while the second meant eliminating enemy players. Yet, as the girl moved forward, she was shot from behind. The hero then realized the red team was nearly eliminated. The chairman, meanwhile, dispatched a giant, bisecting it. The injured chairman had seemingly vanquished both statues. The elder found satisfaction, having previously yearned for this kind of confrontation. Consequently, he then continued his discussion with the younger individual, who claimed there was little left to discuss. The chairman conveyed his admiration for the hero's strategic thinking, given that the present Hunter League primarily emphasized raw power. The chairman, concentrating his efforts, clarified that during his era, when hunters battled in towers, strategy consistently held significant importance. At that moment, the man ceased his movement, then abruptly launched his weapon toward an individual who evaded it just in time. This action bewildered the hero, as even with his invisibility, the man evidently utilized sound to pinpoint his position. Believing the elder individual to be exhausted, the hero became convinced that he and his companions could defeat him. Following this realization, Doge, along with Kim, rushed toward the man at astonishing velocity, only for the man to effortlessly deflect their assault, then dispatching the hero with a single thrust. The chairman successfully intercepted the swift bullet and airborne blades with his shield. Despite the hero's frustration, he considered the vast disparity separating newcomers, such as them, from a first-generation hunter. Even with their utmost effort, similar to the telepath's fate after being stabbed by the formidable chairman, it appeared that Team Red's sole surviving members consisted of the gunner and the sword prodigy. The elder inquired of the youth whether these developments were unforeseen. However, Hang Yul was astonished when the protagonist declared he had anticipated everything. Consequently, the chairman eagerly awaited the hero's plan for his defeat. Following this, the gunner signaled the sword prodigy, who channeled his full strength into his blades, before propelling them forward swiftly, but the chairman stayed composed. His shield effortlessly deflected the incoming blade. Subsequently, the elder rushed toward the new recruits, then eliminated Hang Yul. As a result, only the gunner remained as a participant in the match. Confronting a first-generation hunter alone, the protagonist became extremely anxious. The hero prepared to confront the neutral monster by himself. He considered the elder a tank, a natural predator against more valuable classes like his own, placing the protagonist in a tough position, and Chairman Lee then advanced, asserting his win. Before piercing the protagonist's chest, Changyeon then offered a smile before retrieving a mana bomber. This resulted in a massive blast. All spectators in the audience quietly awaited the game's result to appear through the dust. Arijo also watched with keen anticipation as the airborne particles started to clear. What became visible was that both the younger and older men lay prone on the earth. Minsat Lee found himself astonished, since the hero brought his side success. The referee struggled to grasp the amazing accomplishment the young individual had completed, since he had removed the chairman alongside himself using a mana bomber, leading him to conclude that the most perilous participant in the game was not the chairman, but instead the skilled sniper. Subsequently, the protagonist took his place on the platform. Still, he felt let down. Even after he had managed to avoid the spear and detonate the device, victory over the chairman would have been his. His friend, noting his gloomy appearance, suggested he brighten up. The boy, however, claimed no justification for happiness, given his failure to best the old man. This intrigued the sword prodigy, as it showed the protagonist was unaware. When Changyeon and Dojin Kim then faced him to inquire, he stated it held no significance, causing both of them to be curious. The chairman subsequently ascended the stage. Everyone demonstrated reverence through silence. The old man next faced the genius hunter. Arijo clarified that among the 100,000 awakeners worldwide who emerge annually, each considers this goal. Yet, this goal was not simple, as despite their athletic nature, unlike their warrior beast counterparts, a hunter needed to display exceptional noble characteristics. Only individuals demonstrating all these qualities could eventually become hunters. She then stated that a contestant had shown himself to possess all these traits, having won the competition. Everyone keenly anticipated the outcome, which proved to be the protagonist, who was declared the finest hunter competitor, representing the next generation. As he approached the trophy, the crowd cheered. This evoked an unusual sensation in Changyeon when the judge presented him with this trophy. Despite countless victories in his prior existence, a long-absent feeling of happiness suddenly filled his spirit. By winning the contest, a hero finally gained his mother's consent to pursue his hunting aspirations. The woman then mentioned her husband's immense joy over his child's every achievement, even boasting about him to his companions. Changyeon reflected on how he no longer needed to concern his parents by participating in low-tier events, unlike his previous life. Consequently, only one task remained. The protagonist settled into a chair, then picked up his tea while the chairman inquired about the purpose of his unexpected arrival, which prompted the hero to consider the veteran hunter's cunning nature. Changyun stated that, having secured victory in their wager, he had come to claim the promised team. However, the elder noted that a complete victory hadn't occurred, explaining the hero utilized giants for exhaustion prior to his own takedown. This revelation prompted the young man to depart the office, surprising the elder, who promptly seized his hand and clarified he had merely been joking, then declared their future collaboration. Following this, the elder chose to bestow his team upon the young man present, impressed by his remarkable display. After a period of consideration, he extended his hand toward the elder, confirming his willingness to collaborate with him. The chairman, astonished by such a mature action, the chairman extended his hand, signifying accord, thereby finalizing the arrangement. Subsequently, near the public transportation entry, the protagonist started explaining that Moore's shop had achieved global recognition for its sophisticated weaponry and insight into hunters' requirements. Changyun arrived to request the custom weapon he was guaranteed, yet this did not account for Dojin Kim's attendance, who mentioned his desire for a custom weapon too, since he was preparing to join the Hunter League, a logical reason. The protagonist also found it curious that Min Seok Lee would assist him during his appointment at Moore's shop. Dojin Kim then inquired of Mr. Lee about the distinction between a standard and a custom weapon, prompting Mr. Lee to suggest he forego formal address before clarifying that a custom weapon better matched the hunter and their combat approach, essentially mirroring them. The protagonist subsequently raised his gaze, pondering the duration since his last visit to this establishment. As they stepped inside the structure, the trio caught the receptionist's attention. The woman promptly welcomed Min Seok Lee, whom she had identified. Min Seok Lee inquired about their entry. The receptionist then informed them that their presence was expected in Section B3. This prompted the hero to recall the shop's division into Sections A, B, C, and D, where Section A offered the highest quality and D provided the lowest. The hero felt satisfied knowing his weapon's creation would occur in Section B. The gunner, accompanied by his two companions, reached the advanced laboratory. The ongoing research deeply impressed Dojin Kim. Min Seok Lee observed that the young individuals had no prior workshop experience. The blonde youth confirmed this fact, expressing great excitement, then barraged the elderly judge with inquiries as his companions stayed quiet. The hunter stated he would address those questions subsequently, as his current intention was to instruct them on fundamental concepts. To create a custom weapon, an initial selection of a standard model is required for its foundation, similar to his own 7-branched sword. Min Seok Lee then presented the foundational design of his personalized weapon. The weapon was a standard sword. Dojin Kim found himself impressed again by the method of infusing ordinary armaments with specific characteristics, thereby tailoring them better for the wielder, and he described his alterations. He started sketching 6 extra blades extending from his primary sword. He subsequently elaborated further on the diagram, detailing how its branched blades would enlarge injuries when extracted from adversaries. He handed his conceptual design to the woman, requesting its duplication. Consequently, the device powered on. Instantly, the weapon sketched by the man materialized. Dojin Kim marveled again at how a rudimentary sketch could yield such an intricate armament. Min Seok Lee clarified that this was expected, since they merely articulated their requirements, and the facility itself crafted the armaments, adding that understanding the necessary weapon type and its proper application constituted the crucial element. This prompted the blonde individual to consider thoughtfully the specific armament he desired. However, the main character opted for the identical weapon he owned in his previous life. Nevertheless, he wondered what sort of weapon his companion would ask for. Suddenly, the blonde man conceived a plan, and then he picked up a rapier, a selection that fascinated the hero, since it served as a thrusting weapon. Dojin Kim started listing his requirements. The younger man wished for his weapon to increase his velocity, and also for the rapier to light up once its primary effect engaged, which astonished the hero. Min Seok Lee found this entertaining, mentioning that numerous top players also appreciated visual appeal additionally. He then addressed the contest's champion, asking what he desired. Thus, Changyun opted to disclose his selection. Since firearms were not utilized in his native country, no fundamental design existed. He realized his arcane weapon transmutation skill could shape the weapon itself. This would not be a problem. Therefore, the protagonist extended his hand to take something, then requested authorization for the ingot he held. Min Seok Lee readily assented, confirming it was the winner's entitlement. Following this, the hero started altering the raw material's form, employing his arcane weapon transmutation skill to create a new shape. In an instant, the hero possessed a rifle, which left everyone astonished, witnessing his effortless creation of such an intricate weapon. The protagonist remained unaccustomed to the adoring gazes he frequently encountered, even in his previous existence. A Moors Workshop branch existed globally, wherever the Hunters League operated. These locations constantly competed, with their performance consistently evaluated by two metrics. The initial criterion involved the excellence of their produced weaponry and the proficiency of its user. The Moors Workshop's division within the hero's nation suffered from a poor standing, leading to online criticism of both their equipment and its users, given their perceived lack of strength. Nevertheless, the hero proved unique, since he possessed the ability to reverse the Korean branch's poor fortune. Beyond securing victory in the contest, he also forged a completely novel weapon without any existing blueprint. The woman was resolute in seizing this chance. She then expressed gratitude to the hero for consenting to their meeting, before introducing herself as Hyuna Park, the individual overseeing the Korean branch of the Moors Workshop, and immediately addressing the main topic. She questioned the hero about his satisfaction with the weapon he acquired during the selection process, so it was clarified that he had been compelled to select from this specific category, given its prior designation for the show's victor. Hyuna Park then conveyed that she possessed an intriguing item for the hero, provided his sole interest was a mana ingot, whereupon she offered him a gleaming, mana-infused medallion, which left him quite astonished. The leader of the branch asserted she would provide the hero with this ingot without charge, making him intrigued by the proposal. The woman expressed her desire for the hero to forge his weapon using this ingot, hoping he would achieve renown. However, she anticipated his collaboration with their workshop, utilizing his arcane transmutation to craft novel armaments, a truly enticing proposition. The hero acknowledged the allure of the proposition, but insisted on affixing his signature to every weapon he designed. This declaration utterly perplexed the woman, for the young man seemed to have discerned her underlying plot. He understood that if he crafted his personal weapon using this ingot, the public would mistakenly attribute its creation to their company. Hyuna Park further intended for the hero to forge additional armaments, aiming to launch a series made from A+ ingots. Consequently, she told him he must sign an agreement to work anonymously, keeping his identity private from the public. The hero countered by declaring his intention to provide his expertise to the primary branch of the Moors Workshop, a statement that considerably irritated the woman. The woman then inquired about his conditions. Our hero felt pleased since he could now dictate his requirements, and therefore requested their sponsorship, a demand the lady considered strange given that their division had already provided him a weapon. Ultimately, she agreed to grant him the desired sponsorships, prompting him to explain that the Korean branch would support a team he intended to join, named PR. This news considerably displeased Hyuna Park, because she felt compelled to back one of the least capable Division 3 teams, leading her to propose that our hero select a different team for this sponsorship, one more appropriate. Chang-yeon clarified that this was not feasible, as he had already finalized the agreement. Hearing this, the woman became utterly perplexed, and she then clarified that supporting such a group would not improve their sales figures or public perception, a point our hero considered reasonable, given that weapons would exclusively be produced for the Korean branch. After a period of consideration, the leader of the Korean branch ultimately agreed to dispatch a representative to PR to discuss sponsorship specifics. In this manner, our protagonist compelled the director of the Korean branch of a prominent corporation into an unfeasible agreement. Later that day, our hero reached the stadium, and observing the sparse attendance, remembered this crowd size was typical for a Division 3 match. The ongoing game pitted the team of ESP against PR. Chang-yeon believed PDR would win, considering it was the last-place team versus rank 9. The commentator then explained that PDR could not afford a loss against ESP, thus needing to reverse their fortunes. As the lights illuminated, the hero began to ponder how Division 2 and 3 matches typically occurred in virtual reality, unlike Division 1 matches occur within actual dungeons, where physical harm poses a significant risk. While lesser divisions avoided these concerns, still, the hero observed with surprise that participants appeared frightened and were fleeing. Having observed the contest, the hero felt confused, since the display he had just seen appeared quite poor. A disheartened Chang-yeon had arrived solely to identify promising individuals in PDR, yet the team had suffered defeat. The main character felt especially surprised when informed that PDR had experienced only losses throughout the entire season, which prompted him to direct his attention toward the scoreboard, which verified this fact. Consequently, the hero started to lament his decision to join such a squad, considering it would have been preferable to select a roster of skilled individuals whom he could eventually advance into Division 1. However, following a moment to collect his thoughts, the thought was swiftly discarded by him. The main character resolved to complete the task by discovering a resolution somehow. However, his initial priority involved dismissing numerous players and hoping for a single awakener possessing promise. Subsequently, the hero found himself perplexed because the team's dwelling turned out to be an ordinary home. Yet, he remembered his initial team also lacked financial backing, leading them to utilize standard residences. He chose to accept the situation, and since he had received the access code previously, he promptly input it, gaining entry to the structure, where a disagreement about the team's latest defeat greeted him. The athletes assigned fault to one another as the appointed president attempted to pacify them. The hero understood that disputes naturally arose, given the team's dismal performance. At that moment, the coach observed the young man's arrival, and subsequently presented him to the team members as their new recruit, the victor of Hunters, the next generation. This announcement left every member utterly perplexed. The hero subsequently commended the team's efforts, which were entirely dismal, causing universal astonishment among them. This challenge deeply infuriated one player, who told the newcomer to demonstrate proper deference given their professional status. However, the hero chose to intensify his stance, then ridiculed the man for his offense. The brilliant individual suggested a confrontation against a professional player, stipulating that the defeated party would then manage the team, subsequently challenging the volatile player anew. Subsequently, within the practice area, the protagonist reflected on his team entry and how he addressed members' vulnerabilities. However, merely 3 hunters reacted to his challenges, implying the remaining squad members lacked resolve to confront him. The protagonist subsequently requested they keep their pain receptors active, stating his intent to defeat them that day, desiring all participants to engage with maximum power. However, the impulsive hunter declared he ought to concentrate on his own performance, not theirs. The protagonist identified him as the individual who arrived late to the contest, having confronted the adversary solo. This was Jillian Lee, who, it was hoped, employed a B+ skill called Destructive Charge, generating a shockwave on contact. The protagonist observed this individual's poor training, noting that program newcomers exhibited superior statistics compared to him, since, in his view, the man squandered his valuable skills potential, rendering it difficult to comprehend how he and the squad became pro-hunters. Consequently, the protagonist emitted a weary exhalation. The protagonist had by this point stepped onto the simulated combat arena. Explosions suddenly reached the hero's ears. The situation unfolded precisely as he foresaw, with Jillian Lee employing his skill Destructive Charge to propel himself toward him, but the hero swiftly avoided the attack. Still, the professional player grinned, then rushed into the structure, surprising the hero. At that moment, the earth beneath him began to shift erratically. The protagonist became instantly vigilant, prompting him to leap skyward, evading a shockwave far larger than anticipated, which revealed the skill's true power. Changyun intended for the opponent to think he had been deceived. The individual subsequently propelled himself toward the gunner, assuming an effortless win. However, he was merely an unwitting pawn in the hero's scheme. Changyun then deployed his air anchor. This maneuver allowed him to ascend, placing the pro-hunter in a difficult spot as the rifle was aimed, and a lone shot rang out. Everyone was astonished by the battle's outcome. The heroes, positioned atop the structure with their friend restrained, inquired who wished to engage them initially, then declared he would inflict severe suffering upon them, causing both individuals to become fearful as his gun discharged. Returning to reality, the vanquished hunters experienced intense torment and subsequently remembered their wager. The losing party had to depart from PR, a term they did not agree to. Nevertheless, the hero disregarded this, instructing them to leave. Witnessing this, both individuals promptly departed the room, declaring that their team would achieve nothing. However, Gil and Lee, filled with anger, still hesitated. The hero then moved closer to him, attempting to expel him once more, but at that moment, the pro-hunter bit his lip and caused his lip to bleed while offering an apology to the hero, a gesture that deeply piqued the hero's interest. Gillen Lee confirmed his responsibility for the error prior to imploring the prodigy for readmission. Changhyun recognized the man's tenacious spirit and requested a justification for his continued presence on the team, given his defeat by a novice. The exasperated player stated that destructive charge constituted a powerful ability, and although it represented his sole strong attribute, he believed this would suffice as justification. Changhyun acknowledged destructive charge's undeniable utility, so he criticized the man for possessing a potent skill but failing to employ it effectively, subsequently mentioning his previous offer of counsel. However, the professional hero resolutely promised to obey all the hero's directives, provided he remained part of the team. Consequently, Changhyun informed Gillen Lee that the man was prohibited from responding to anyone except himself, then inquired if his declaration was sincere. The impulsive player assented. The protagonist felt uncertain about his choice. However, observing the team's skeletal structure and their lack of funds for new members, he opted to utilize the impulsive player for team discipline. Later, in his room, the hero pondered replacing the two dismissed players. Changhyun sought to recruit Haeju-yu, but she promptly refused, declaring with anger that joining him was out of the question. This saddened the hero, given the Hammer Genius's exceptional talent. At that instant, a contact reached him which left him astonished. Changhyun found it surprising to see the sword prodigy, who, having learned of the recruitment from Haeju-yu, began speaking first. Hang Yeol, the premier teen player from a capital's private academy, surprised the protagonist by attempting to join PR. Still, the hero then surmised that his outstanding display must have impressed the new contact. After confirming his interest in joining, the protagonist questioned him regarding LHR and the academy, and he responded that a conversation with them was necessary. The hero felt immense happiness from this discussion, recognizing the value of his remarkable hunter performance. The prodigy's sword, representing the next generation, promised to be a significant contribution to the group. At that moment, the hero got a new alert, which left him perplexed because an additional person sought to join the squad, a truly remarkable individual. After reviewing the group's records and data, the hero found himself in a difficult situation, since skill coordination is paramount for group combat. A quality PR lacked. Furthermore, beyond their complete absence of coordination, the individual statistics for every member were quite poor. At that moment, the hero observed something. Yeonju Lee, the girl, held a skill called Potential Awareness. Her ability enabled rapid target triangulation. The hero found this impressive, particularly when considering its combination with the sword prodigy and also with the two hunters who had reached out to him the previous evening. Such a combination meant PDR possessed the capability to excel within the Division III leagues. Subsequently, inside the chairman's office, the chairman questioned the hero concerning his views on PR, inquiring if he valued their abilities, then sarcastically asserted that their vast potential stemmed from his own diligent efforts, which led Jung-taek Lee to clarify his inability to dedicate time to being an effective manager. The chairman subsequently mentioned the hero's recruitment activities and expressed astonishment at his success in securing the Moore's Workshop sponsorship for them. The chairman next questioned the hero regarding the type of team he desired to establish. The hero clarified that he envisioned two distinct concepts. The initial one aligning with what the chairman probably anticipated, where the entire team depended solely upon him. The chairman noted that such an approach would be entirely predictable, before emphasizing that any team employing a singular strategy was destined for failure. This prompted the protagonist to conceive a different plan. The concept remained under development, but he assured the president it would become a powerful strategy upon completion. This revelation surprised the elder considerably, prompting him to allow the younger individual to manage the circumstances. Following this, the chairman moved to the main topic, presenting the protagonist with official papers confirming his new role as the legitimate president of PR. However, as the hero prepared to depart, he was told the team's final seasonal match had concluded, and a press conference was scheduled for the next day, requiring his attendance as PR's new president and representative. Following a brief consideration, the hero consented to appear, driven by a hidden agenda. The following day at the press briefing, the protagonist experienced boredom. Following his introduction as the new team PR president, also acting as a player, the audience showed no interest in questioning him. Consequently, the individual chose to inquire with the LTD president, whose team secured first place this season through excellent collaboration, about his thoughts on his player's promotion to Division II. The LTE president then clarified that it was a valid inquiry and that their roster would be filled by equally skilled players, adding that their intention was to enlist multiple awakeners, whom they regarded as the top prospects. The hero attempted to discern the identity of the individual being referenced as the future best, but at that moment, he recognized this person as a familiar face, specifically Director Lee. This individual, destined to become the Division 1 LTT coach, had compelled our hero to prematurely activate his full bloom, and presently served as a coach in the minor leagues. This person's identity was Hyun-Min Lee. The show's host mentioned rumors of LHR training a hunter, then questioned the coach about this young man's potential appearance next season. However, the coach stated they could not provide a definitive response at present. The protagonist understood that the sword prodigy was destined to join this squad. The man then addressed PR, mentioning its new president. Following this, the protagonist declared himself PR's new president. The host detailed how our hero became the first middle schooler to simultaneously hold roles as both player and president, then questioned his intentions for PR. Despite the team's complete season of losses, he promised significant alterations. Details of these modifications were then requested from our hero by the interviewer. The protagonist outlined plans for replacing some players, while he simultaneously performed as both coach and player. Just as he prepared to discuss their sponsor, the host quickly interrupted him, opting to move on to the next person, completely disregarding the young man, while he insisted he had not finished speaking. The annoyed interviewer had no choice but to allow the protagonist to speak. And so Changhyun explained that after observing many matches in Division 3, no team truly demonstrated competence. This caused a cold silence to fall over the studio. This assertion provoked Director Lee's strong displeasure. He then instructed the coaches to prepare, stating that his team intended to overcome them. He subsequently indicated to the director, asserting their certainty in defeating his squad, since it would disgrace the leading team to suffer defeat from the lowest-ranked competitor. Following this, he pursued his taunts, confident in his ability to excel across diverse areas. Entryways swung open. Changhyun felt pleased by their eventual arrival, as Jisoo, Dojin Kim, and Hangyul stood outside his residence. After stepping inside, the blonde individual noted that the team's base of operations was merely a modest dwelling. However, when the protagonist clarified that the team lacked funds for anything grander, he started considering Dojin Kim's initial contact as entirely expected. Conversely, this action proved unexpected from the telepath. Jisoo subsequently observed the protagonist's gaze upon him. Jisoo then inquired if a problem existed. However, the satisfied hero, smiling broadly, confirmed all was well, following a thorough inspection of the team's dormitory. Hangyul expressed that although he knew this was a beginner team, its poor state was unexpected. Jisoo then mentioned his enrollment occurred solely because the hero had pledged to move him to a superior team once his profile improved. Nevertheless, the hero calmed their concerns, explaining a strategy was already conceived. Otherwise, their recruitment would not have happened, and then declared them the team's strongest members. He therefore urged them to anticipate significant achievements. However, the three youths harbored skepticism while situated within a manager's office. Hangyul Choi, ESP's manager, found himself notably irritated, contemplating his skilled players, who consistently faced defeat. Just as he started seeking a resolution, a sudden notification arrived from the coach, detailing PDR's request for a friendly match. The coach's message indicated player participation was expected, as the off-season had begun. He believed this presented a solution to his issue, convinced that only winning could end their losing streak. Consequently, he promptly reached out to the coach regarding the friendly game, requesting a specific date be set for the contest. The team members expressed curiosity about this exhibition game, as competing during the off-season was uncommon for them. Discussion then shifted to PDR's new manager, who had disparaged LTT. The players considered this amusing, given their certainty of LTT's defeat even facing PDR. When the match day came, the coach questioned the young man's certainty regarding his choice, noting the protagonist's recent introduction to veteran team members and the need for new recruits to acclimate. The coach clarified their insufficient number of hunters for an internal 7v7 match, but as the man attempted to press his point, the hero asserted the necessity of action to aid this struggling team, which left the trainer both curious and hesitant. The hero clarified their impending loss and remain in last place. Ongoing losses foster hopelessness, causing players to lose their competitive advantage. However, he asserted that when the prospect of victory is present, circumstances change for people. The hero chose to give Pierre hope, believing his involvement alone might shift the match's outcome. And with a smile, the hero resolved to prove they too could soon enjoy a win. An individual approached the hero, stating uncertainty about whether to call him president or manager, then introduced himself as ESP's manager. When their hands met, the hero noticed the man's eyes held no gravity, indicating an arrogant dismissal of their capabilities. The game was set to commence. Changhyun questioned his squad's readiness. He confirmed his leadership role, expecting careful adherence to his instructions. Nevertheless, he harbored reservations about their capacity to follow through. The protagonist considered the team's composition, all current members, himself, and one new addition. Still, he resolved to demonstrate their potential for triumph despite the circumstances, then faced Gil-hen, assigning him to the front line, and strictly commanded him to hold that position unless he gave a different directive. Changyun next addressed Yeonju, telling her to remain nearby and align with his actions. Dojin Kim subsequently requested his directives. The protagonist clarified his desire for his companion to guard his front, preventing any approach, which prompted speculation that a direct assault was not desired, but Changhyun stated that comprehension would arrive at the appropriate moment. Subsequently, the amicable contest commenced as both teams materialized on the terrain. The ESP manager identified the location as the Imperial Bridge, a battlefield restricting tactical options because of its straightforward design. The manager selected this location because its design made team composition the deciding factor. Someone then noted to the manager the impressive solidity of the newly assembled team's formation. Choi, however, clarified that this was merely superficial, given their recent final match, then indicated the formation would quickly collapse once movement began. Such was the expected outcome. Still, the manager observed the vanguard's robust appearance. He then faced an inquiry about whether the hero had trained the team, to which his reply was that this information would become apparent during the match. At that moment, activity registered on the map. While the hero employed his air anchor for elevation, the opposing team highlighted his exposed state. The manager found this favorable, as the protagonist appeared to disregard his own location while directing the team. Consequently, an adversary rushed towards him, aiming to capitalize on this unique chance, and, having adjusted his spear's hold, he sought to halt our hero, who then dodged at the final instant. Witnessing this, the manager started to believe the hero's position was not a mistake, and after Dojun Kim eliminated the spearman, they understood this was a clever strategy to draw in his opponents. The manager found it impossible to trust his vision, since he had observed a tactic where a crucial role like a marksman was deliberately jeopardized. Following this, the main character readied his firearm, causing everyone to become vigilant, prompting the tank to shield his allies behind him as he started to dread the outcome. Realizing the protagonist possessed the ability to transform mana bombers into projectiles. Instantly, the opposing team's vanguard shield was utterly destroyed, creating a powerful concussive blast across the bridge. The contest concluded with Purr achieving a decisive win, leaving ESB's manager utterly perplexed. Their defeat by Par occurred almost instantly. Concurrently, within the dungeon, after observing the events that had unfolded, Gil-hen felt astonishment, realizing that he initially failed to grasp the team leader's strategy of self-sacrifice, yet the leader secured their triumph. Following this remarkable accomplishment, the Vanguard member found himself deeply impressed by our hero. Once the match concluded, PER's members started discussing their joy at securing victory, and our hero listened contentedly until Gil-hen suddenly approached him, inquiring about his method for achieving their win. Changhyun responded with a smile, asking the young man if he understood the crucial element in a lineup battle. The young man replied that maintaining formation integrity was key. However, upon inquiring how to disrupt the opposing team's structure, the professional player remained unable to provide a solution. Changhyun clarified that the resolution involved either allowing opponents to break their own ranks or overpowering them directly. Gil-hen felt astonished, realizing the simplicity of this answer had completely eluded his thoughts. Changhyun detailed his use of a method named Former, which enticed adversaries into an offensive setup, then attacked during their transition. Consequently, the professional player grasped the reason for the team leader's solo advance, leaving himself exposed. Changhyun subsequently noted the young man's probable astonishment at the solution's apparent simplicity. The prodigy then approached them, stating that effective responses were consistently straightforward but undeniable, and added that the team's excellent coordination suggested prior practice before his arrival. However, the sniper clarified that no training occurred. Instead, he had merely selected an uncomplicated formation. Hangul subsequently understood this constituted a component of the hero's overall plan, prompting him to inquire whether they could consistently employ this approach, given this strategy promised dominance within Division 3, especially with Dojon and Jizu bolstering their ranks. The marksman then stated that while the idea seemed perfect, he reflected that even Division 3 could present challenges. The 9th place team was barely defeated, despite their numerous prior wins, meaning this tactic wasn't consistently viable. This method could bring success against less powerful teams, however, it would prove ineffective against stronger adversaries. Changhyun later clarified that a repeated strategy would diminish in effectiveness once discovered. Jizu insisted on understanding the youth's strategy, given his PER enrollment was based entirely on trusting him. This caused the hero to remember Jizu's unique position as the team's only member, having been guaranteed that once their standing increased, he would facilitate his move to a superior position for his career's advancement. He informed his teammates that devising a different tactic was necessary. Nevertheless, the grabbing wielder argued that such an effort was without purpose, given the team's severe lack of effective skills. But at that instant, our hero's lips curved into a smile. Then he explained that their team possessed resources beyond mere skills, which astonished his teammates. Jizu, however, struggled to comprehend. When the team's leader produced a mana bomber, the hero clarified their intention to utilize it, then strongly asserted PER's future specialization in mana bombers. Subsequently, within the locker room, Hangul felt bewildered after receiving instructions to practice levitating numerous swords simultaneously. The president inquired whether his training regimen presented any difficulties. A sword prodigy refuted this, but mentioned that managing too many blades would prove challenging. This reasoning resonated with the hero, since effectively engaging foes via sword telekinesis required employing only a few blades for optimal concentration. Nevertheless, the hero knew clearly that during his previous existence, the sword prodigy managed 7 blades simultaneously, demonstrating a great swordsman's mastery, necessitating his intervention to accelerate the prodigy's development. Changyun then explained the training's utility, assuring the young man he wouldn't be compelled, his voice tinged with regret. The sword prodigy reacted with shock upon hearing this. The hero understood Hangul's team involvement stemmed from admiration, anticipating the situation's effect on him. Ultimately, the young man consented, recognizing it as an unavoidable practice. He questioned the coach regarding the quantity of blades he should employ, and the coach specified 7, which surprised the young man, as the coach confirmed this amount would be sufficient. That night, Jusu discovered with surprise he needed to practice precisely dropping distant items. The hero affirmed the necessity of maximum accuracy. The grabby wielder struggled to grasp this concept since his ability proved more effective in close combat. The grabby wielder then requested the hero's plan, wanting to assess its value. Changhyun chose to reveal his approach to the other man and explained how he intended for him to deploy explosives, a concept the wielder found confusing. The protagonist then clarified he referred to mana bombers. Their tactic involved attaching a piece of the gadget onto the sword prodigy's blades, then having Jusu manipulate his gravity to release them as the sword remained airborne. Essentially, the hero sought to merge their abilities, forming an unparalleled aerial assault. Jusu reacted with astonishment to the proposal. The protagonist confirmed this approach bore the name Bomber Strategy. The hero's method involved launching the sword prodigy's blades laden with mana bomber fragments. These would subsequently fall. Jusu's gravity control would ensure precise hits on foes. The tactic still lacked one crucial component, as its execution depended entirely on knowing the target's precise whereabouts. However, the hero possessed an individual capable of fulfilling this requirement, specifically his teammate Yeonju Lee. She held the skill Positional Awareness, enabling her to pinpoint any close enemy's exact position. Changyun clarified that her ability was vital for triangulating the enemy's location, then inquired if she would assist. But the girl nervously stated her inadequacy, fidgeting with her fingers. Unexpectedly, the hero grasped her hand and asserted her as the critical component for the tactic's success, explaining the plan would fail without her involvement. Consequently, Changhyun requested his teammate's assistance, and following a brief moment of reluctance, she ultimately consented to assist. The protagonist couldn't comprehend Yeonju Lee's flushed face, since her thought process eluded him. Subsequently, the team leader and 3 members stood before cameras. The individual loudly announced it was their turn, explaining it was a brief interview to mark the season's start. The hero remembered his previous interview's rude conduct, deciding to stay silent on this occasion. At that moment, he heard someone ridiculing his team. The man then explained the team would surely fail, citing their teenage manager's inexperience and youth. The interviewer attempted to mitigate the man's hostile remarks, suggesting PR might be trying a new strategy after their poor performance last season. Changhyun confirmed his status as a teenager, then declared that once PR defeats Yu's team, Yu would be just an old man with no notable achievements. This infuriated the man immensely, when suddenly, an interviewer intervened, stopping the situation from worsening. This left Yu consumed by anger. Changhyun found it amusing that a team of similar strength underestimated them so greatly. He therefore resolved to demonstrate his team's capability to Yu in their initial game. Subsequently, the protagonist had a reliable supporter nearby, a skilled swordsman who questioned his choice. The hero then clarified that strategies needed swift implementation, adding that their own approach would not be easily countered, even if disclosed prematurely. The youth did not object, yet he remained uncertain. The president then understood that Hangyul likely believed they could defeat the 8th-ranked team through conventional combat. The protagonist fully recognized that if this strategy were employed, he would bear the primary burden, but he also understood it would not serve the present PER's advantage. Changhyun pointed out his teammates' crucial role in the bombing plan for the strategy's success, prompting an assurance of his best effort. This outcome satisfied the hero, and so the protagonist, with his squad, entered the arena. Changhyun resolved to demonstrate Pier's value to everyone while moving toward the crowd's roar. League regulations stipulated that the lowest-ranked team could select the Hunters League arena, and because PR held the lowest position, they gained the privilege of choosing their battlefield. Consequently, the city of Arena map was their selection. The protagonist subsequently messaged his bombing squad members, instructing them to deploy the tactic after finding optimal positions, then requested the remaining 3 to engage numerous adversaries while striving to avoid demise. Yeonju Lee updated the team on her location, stating she was on a building's upper floor at the map's eastern edge, and intended to wait within the office situated on the far left. Her skill was then initiated, enabling her to precisely identify the target's positions and reveal them to her team. The protagonist considered this ability's great utility on large maps. The girl then informed her teammates of the exact meeting point for their enemies, prompting the protagonist to open his map to mark and view the precise location. With everyone in place, the hero declared they would destroy the building and shoot anyone attempting to escape. Changhyun then explained that if they tried to avoid his bullets, they would become direct targets for the bomber's strategy. The hero then inquired if everyone was ready, and they confirmed everything was prepared. This pleased our hero, who readied his rifle, as they could finally begin. With that said, blades, laden with mana bomber fragments, started traversing the sky. His hiding spot concealed the sniper, who remained quiet and prepared for engagement. He subsequently instructed his teammates to initiate the bombing. Immediately after, a mana bomber fragment separated from a blade, descending onto the structure. Concurrently, within the structure where the opposing team patiently awaited, a player remembered their coach's instruction to exercise caution regarding the day's adversary. The coach had advised that, although the protagonist was youthful, they must avoid impulsive actions stemming from underestimation. The player mused that an intricate strategy wasn't necessary to confront a novice such as our hero, but he and his squad resolved to exert maximum effort. The player intended to deploy his skill-devastating strides, capable of generating an earthquake, thereby ambushing the foe upon their appearance. Consequently, he anticipated their arrival with fervor, harboring a strong wish to eliminate them. However, at that precise moment, the mana bomber fragments separated from the blade. A trembling roof overhead bewildered the players, prompting one player to instruct his team to deploy mana shields for defense. In this manner, protection was secured by the players from the descending debris. The boy remembered the protagonist's prior attempt to collapse the structure during the competition, thus anticipating a repeat of that strategy, believing the hero had utilized the artifact's power to cause the building's collapse, suggesting his mana reserves were significantly depleted when his attention was suddenly captured by 3 flying blades visible outside. The enemy team grew vigilant from this curious sight. A player identified it as the Sword Prodigy's ability, while the orange-haired individual understood the opponent was attempting a remote elimination, prompting him to instruct his teammates to neutralize the blades. Following this, he started wielding his own sword against the airborne blades. Simultaneously, the gravity skill was initiated. The gravity skill released every piece of the mana bombers onto the disoriented opposing squad. The individual understood his current position was at the edge of losing. A massive blast then happened, and instantly, the youth experienced intense agony. Nevertheless, he endured. The youth was astonished that the weapon had detonated. Concurrently, an individual waited beyond the crumbling structure. Subsequently, a fleeing participant entered his sights. A lone projectile swiftly dispatched the target. The marksman felt satisfied, his involvement having been minimal. He understood the adversaries chose distant assaults, recognizing their weakness against the blades during close quarters fighting. However, this would prove challenging, given the individual controlling the blades was the sword prodigy. Consequently, their champion recognized that success was assured. With the contest concluding, Team TD experienced a devastating loss. This sight left the man bewildered as he had never encountered such a strategy. Jin Han Lee, the first division manager of LTD, had not anticipated this outcome in the lower leagues. The manager then questioned his colleague if that strategist was the individual who caused issues at the Division 3 interview. His colleague confirmed this, reluctantly acknowledging the hero's capabilities. Our hero had deeply impressed the first division manager. The man then inquired why Changhyun hadn't been recruited, but his colleague confirmed they had tried. However, the hero seemed already affiliated with Team PR, having promptly declined all their generous offers. Jin Han Lee declared that regret was now futile, then instructed the Division 2 team to contact our hero. The sniper captured the man's keen interest. Attention returned to Team PR's win. Their recent accomplishment still perplexed the young man. He mentioned they had finally secured a victory. Jin Han Lee, too, felt impressed. The team leader advised against excessive excitement for their initial win, adding that celebrations would occur post-interview. He further foresaw the sword prodigy becoming the match's MVP. Subsequently, the match's MVP, Heng Yol-yeon, began his interview. The interviewer questioned the young man regarding the strategy his team, newcomers last season, employed for their significant win. Heng Yol stated he merely obeyed the team leader's directives. This response deeply fascinated the journalist. The sword prodigy reiterated his sole adherence to Changhyun's commands. Following this, the interviewer mentioned social media's frenzy regarding the strategy, likening it to sophisticated military maneuvers. However, to his astonishment, the match's MVP revealed their team leader. The MVP mentioned their leader had characterized the strategy similarly, then highlighted that their tactic remained flawless throughout the game, expressing deep respect for him. The hero felt bewildered by this revelation, since his colleague chose his moment of glory to praise him. Dojin Kim then remarked that the sniper appeared almost like a cult leader, which was abruptly affirmed by another person. The teammate declared Mr. Changhyun merited such reverence. This peculiar conduct piqued the protagonist's interest, prompting him to request his teammates cease the formal address, deeming it inappropriate given the player's seniority. The hero's teammate became visibly mortified. Changhyun knew his team would be ecstatic, having secured their initial win after a considerable period. He also felt confident PEI would increase its strength and undoubtedly control the Division 3 league. The blonde individual, having finished his noodles, observed our hero walking past and inquired if he had plans for his day off. Our hero, the team's leader, stated he had an appointment, then reminded his friend to remain diligent during the season, even on a weekend. Following this exchange, the sniper said goodbye to the swordsman. Dojin Kim completed his soup and set the bowl down, then chose to view his television programs. Soon afterward, outside the stadium for the Hunters League, a person waved at our hero, who was Min-suk Lee, and our hero promptly returned the greeting. Min-suk Lee assured the young man that his timing was perfect. Changhyun inquired about entering, and Min-suk Lee assented. The stadium echoed with the fervent enthusiasm of hunting fans and their excited shouts. Our hero calmly took his seat. Min-suk Lee questioned our hero about his familiarity with main matches, noting his apparent knowledge of the stadium. Our hero found this amusing, given his extensive past life experience there, but he attributed his familiarity to being a professional player. Min-suk Lee, unconvinced, conveyed his delight at our hero's presence, expressing concern that he might have been working on his day off due to the ongoing season. Changhyun thanked the man for the invitation to the Korea versus Japan match, a contest their nation typically lost. Our hero then inquired if the confrontation was compelling, prompting the man to remark on his harshness towards Korea. Min-suk Lee stated that although Japan was a formidable team, their opponents included some of Korea's top Division 1 hunters. Our hero felt dissatisfaction with his country's current standing, so Min-suk Lee asserted that their national team members were not inherently weak, and he desired our hero to observe this match because he would eventually represent his country, thus urging him to seek retribution for them. The man then clarified that this was not his sole motive for bringing him. He also intended to introduce him to a friend from the Japanese team. The smacker grasped the full situation, since Min-suk Lee held strong faith in his abilities, leading him to closely watch the game, aiming to evaluate his nation's standing. The competition concluded, with Min-suk Lee suggesting it was time for them to depart. The Korean squad suffered defeat, having eliminated merely 2 Japanese hunters. When the hero noted their loss, Min-suk Lee suggested visiting his international acquaintance, leading the hero to perceive that even though the man feigned indifference, he appeared rather annoyed by the outcome. Observing his suppressed vexation, the hero offered to encounter the Japanese hunter. Soon afterward, the hero stood by until the Korean hunter gained recognition and offered a wave. The individual was a prominent figure among the nation's Japanese hunters, Takumi Minamino. The pair of companions promptly exchanged greetings, embracing. Takumi Minamino questioned his companion about failing to initially welcome his compatriot, yet Min-suk Lee stated the current generation lacked promise, indicating he would place his trust in future hunters of tomorrow. He then presented our protagonist to his associate, a person recognized as Japan's most prominent offensive sharpshooter, before introducing our protagonist to Takumi Minamino, whom he characterized as a budding talent recently joining the hunting world. Following this, the 2 individuals exchanged handshakes. The hunter from Japan started scrutinizing the youth, then inquired of his companion whether he could evaluate his abilities. However, Min-suk Lee told the hunter from Japan that direct inquiry to the young man was necessary. Changyeon promptly understood that Takumi Minamino had likely withdrawn from the world of hunting during his era, given his inability to recall his name. Consequently, the protagonist activated his visual ability to inspect those stats. This competitor possessed high agility and could shoot rapid volleys, boosting his destructive power whenever he struck identical targets repeatedly. Furthermore, the protagonist clearly viewed his overall capabilities. Battling the incredibly hostile and renowned Japanese shooter thrilled Changyeon immensely. Without hesitation, the youth agreed to the challenge proposed by Takumi Minamino. The older fighter commented on the boy's blazing resolve, prompting the protagonist to reply that his true potential remained hidden. Hostility spiked between both shooters, leaving Min-suk Lee exhausted from just observing their fierce standoff. Observing the recent defeat suffered by Korea, the corporate executive mentioned his previous belief regarding their equal footing with the Japanese rivals. In response, the competitor justified their progress by mentioning a near-fatal strike against another foe, though the businessman insisted the reality was far more difficult. Yelling furiously at Chun-yup Kang, the executive complained about losing despite fielding elite members, threatening to cut off future participant support if the situation persisted. Following that outburst, the frustrated official stormed out of the area. Chun-yup Kang remained solitary with Director Lee. The player questioned Director Lee about any promising individuals he might have identified within LTD's ranks while observing Divisions 3 and 2. The director then recalled his success in discovering significant talents, such as the prodigy swordsmen, who were not affiliated with LTD. Director Lee understood that a contest involving the grabby wielder and the sword prodigy would prove highly valuable, even for a Division 1 squad. He subsequently pondered the hero who triumphed in the TV show competition, considering that Korea could benefit from such an individual. However, he chose to swiftly dismiss these notions, since all of them were Division 3 teenagers incapable of meeting his extreme requirements. Our protagonist was situated within a training area, accompanied by a foreign individual and his companion. Min-suk Lee started considering how his friend intended to stir up problems anew, given that he remained the identical person he recognized from their time as international teammates. Min-suk Lee questioned his companion, who stated a desire to evaluate the young man's power since he simply wished to engage the young man in combat. Consequently, Akwi was requested to hold back his full power. Nevertheless, the individual confirmed his prior knowledge of facing a Division 3 Korean player, and therefore stated his intention to take it easy on the youth. The protagonist observed Min-suk Lee's laughter, prompting him to also display a grin, an action that inexplicably irritated the Japanese hunter, leading Min-suk Lee to conclude that both sharpshooters were challenging individuals.